Okay,
Recording.
good evening, everyone. This is Lori Charlton. It's February 20th, 24. Welcome to the quarterly meeting of the Board of Finance. I'll call the meeting to order and ask that we all please stand. Mr. Gerber, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. To the members of the public who've dialed in or joined us on the WebEx tonight, you are muted and will not be heard by board members, and there will be no live public comment until called for during the meeting. Public comment pertinent to items 6 through 11, which are our voting items this evening, are welcome and will be called for before those items are heard. If you're on the WebEx and wish to provide public comment, please include your name and address in the chat box now or in any time prior to the items being called. Members of the public are always encouraged to send their comments and questions in writing to the board at bof@fairfieldct.org. And if you do so, please remember to include your name and address for the record as you would with live comment. The agenda for tonight's meeting includes our normal quarterly update on budget to actual results for the operating budgets for the town and Fairfield Public Schools through the second quarter of the fiscal year, which takes us through December 31st, 2023. As typical, we'll also hear a quarterly update from a representative from the JRIB concerning the performance of the town's pension and OPEB portfolio. Aside from those quarterly updates, we have a number of voting items on the agenda, including authorizations and bond resolutions for various capital projects, department transfers, and proposed updates to our senior and disabled tax relief program. I do want to note that the posted backup materials for this evening were slightly revised earlier today. And so for the members of the public that are following along, please make sure you're looking at the most current backup, and you can get there by navigating to the section that says more under the meeting materials on the town website, and you'll see a link to the revised backup under additional documents. So with that, we will move to item 3 to review the current status of the town's pension and OPEB funds. Backup materials for this item are posted online. And again, just to make sure everyone's looking at the correct document, the first page of the document is dated January 24th, 2024. And we have Mr. Tom Collmore here representing the Joint Retirement Investment Board, and he's going to take us through it. Welcome, Mr. Collmore.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I'm speaking here on behalf of Carolyn Trabuco, who can't be here. She's on an international business trip, and she extends her regrets. I'll be using the template that she uses typically. So if everybody could turn to slide 10 of the handout. Same. I was sitting here about a year ago. This would not be a very pleasant discussion to have. Hopefully discussion. But we've actually had a very good year, whether you measure by fiscal year to date, 1 year, or month results. About this time last year, or at the end of 2022, we had 415 million plus in portfolio. And then at the end of the year, this past year, 2023, we had in excess of 452 million in value, mostly due to appreciation and investment income. A very good story. If you look to the right of the slide, you'll see the breakdown by the current portfolio allocation, U.S. equities, read across 31%, non-U.S. equities 21% roughly, U.S. fixed income about 23%, non-U.S. fixed income about 9%. You can see private equities about 8.5%, and real estate about 5.68%. So that's the composition of the portfolio. We'll move next to backwards to slide 4, please, which is the performance slide. And you can see we had 3 months, as I said, of solid performance. Calendar year has been very strong, especially equities, but within equities, especially U.S. equities. In addition, following an abysmal 2020, the worst year in fixed income since 1928, we had a solid, if not spectacular, back in income. Moving ahead to slide 6. You can see how the equity performance and the bond performance fit within the years being measured. And as I said, equity performance is quite good. And fixed income was above average. See 2022, they're all often lonely by itself in fixed income land, not a very good performance. That's it. So again, happy to be here in beginning of 2024, close to a year ago. I'll mention one of our favorite topics, volatility. Volatility, in addition for equities, was lower than average. A good fact. I'll take a sidestep here. This has been a great year. 2022 was an abysmal year, but of course, we're a long-term investor. We're a pension plan. So as much as we want to gloat about how great results were in this past year, and we hang our heads in shame over how poor results were in 2022, it's actually a long-term position that we're taking. So we shouldn't get too excited about all the good news that I'm conveying. Moving to slide 17. We see a repeat of the market value for OPEB, 84 million, up from 70 million about a year ago. The performance numbers again were quite good. Say fixed income and equities broken out about 65 to 35% between U.S. and non-U.S. And the investment highlights. I'll mention some updates from the JREG. We're currently working with a consultant, as the board knows, to generate a short list of OCIO, that is outsourced chief investment officer candidates. That's the next step, a short list of candidates. We found in working with the consultant that Vanguard fees were quite low, which is good while we had Vanguard, but we don't have Vanguard, or we're not with Vanguard anyway. So slightly bad news is that the good fees that we're getting, we're no longer in all probability going to have. And we're going to be re-examining the investment policy statement, the IPS, with the consultant as part of that contract. So a few reminders. The Milliman actuary presentation is coming up in March. The discount rate of 6.9% will be discussed in July. I mentioned that we're long-term investors, so as much as I'm excited about the past year performance, again, it's to be taken with a grain of salt. And we're transitioning to Milliman Pension Administration Services in the middle part of this year. So that's perhaps a rushed through presentation, but the good news is it's good news. So, I can take any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Mr. Collmore. Can you just, before I turn it over to the board for questions, follow up on the last item? Can you remind us of the timeline for the new OCIO process? When do we lose Vanguard, and when do you anticipate having a new provider in place?
I think we talked about April being a date that we would hope to have the new OCIO in place. That's an accelerated time frame. I think pretty good. Yeah, I come from business. That would be good, I think, for business to execute on, much less a town. But that's a timetable, Madam Chair, that we're envisioning.
Thank you for that. Questions from the board? Anyone? Mr. Walsh.
Thanks for being here, Tom. Evening. Filling in. And we started off near page 10, I think. Started, and under private equity, it lists that our current percentage of allocation is 49%. The policy is 5%. Is there like a 5% range you're allowed to go outside of your policy or something like that?
The IPS currently has 5%. We voted to increase it to 10%. But it's guidance. It's not a law or try to stay within the policy range. I've not heard anybody give a percentage point rule of thumb for variation from the guidance, but that's guidance.
All right, so we should expect at the next meeting that we have with your board that number 5% should be changed to 10%?
Correct.
Okay. When was that voted on?
Late last year.
Late last year, okay. That's the only question I have, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Are there other questions from board members? Okay. Mr. Collmore, I just have one, and I'm sure we're going to hear various predictions on this, but there is a slide in here. It's page 31 where Vanguard is providing a forecast of rate cuts, interest rate cuts in 2024. And it's by country. So if I focus on the US, I'm looking at the colors here, but I'm trying to, can you interpret that for us in terms of numbers? What is that telling us in terms of their forecast of rate cuts in 2024 through, and I guess this goes through 2025. So is this our fiscal year that they're forecasting here?
I don't think Vanguard would align with our fiscal year. I'm assuming it's a calendar year. I printed this out in black and white, so I can't actually see the colors of the, yes. Looking at 24 to 25, I see rates.
Is that roughly 2% through the end of 25 then? Is that what I'm reading? It's hard to tell because you have to sort of line it up.
I see higher than 2%. If we take the end of 20, I take the end of the range.
I'm sorry, a 2% reduction. Is what I meant to say?
That does seem about, yes, I would, my eyeballing of the chart, yes, it looks like a 2%.
Okay, and they're taking us out through what you believe to be calendar 25 with that.
Yeah, with not much of a scale there, but yes, that's how I estimate that the scale works.
Okay, interesting. All right, any other questions?
We also predicted a recession for about now, so obviously they're subject to error as anybody is.
Oh, of course, yeah. As I said, we get various points of view on this, and we have our budget season coming up, so it's just interesting to hear what our different service providers are saying.
Sure.
Mr. Walsh, you had another question?
Yes, when you made the vote, change the private equity to 10%, what area did you take the 5% out of? You had the lower one of your sectors.
I don't remember. That's a good point. I don't remember where we took it from.
You have your chairwoman to send us that information. I'd appreciate it.
Okay, great. Is that it then for Mr. Collmore? Anyone else? All right. Well, Tom, thank you for pinch hitting for Ms. Trabucco. We appreciate you being here, and thank you for the presentation.
My pleasure.
And, and thanks, and also for everything your board is doing. I know this is a lot with this surprise development with Vanguard, so I'm sure it's a lot of work for you all, but thank you for all you're doing.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to move to item 4 to review the BOE fiscal year 24 Q2 financial update. So the materials for this item begin on page 45 of the posted backup. We have Ms. Laborious here, who's the CFO for Fairfield Public Schools, to take us through the presentation. I also see Mr. Testani and some representatives from the Board of Education. Ms. Jacobson and Mr. Peterson, welcome. Thank you for being here. And we will turn this over to whichever of you wants to kick us off.
Okay, thank you so much for having us here. Nice to see a few new faces. I was asked by Jen to bring the backup with me.
Yeah, wasn't included.
Wasn't included. Okay, I'm not sure why, but so I apologize. In addition, I'm just going to pass around backup for our response to the audit that came up at a previous meeting.
Okay.
And that's just for information. So for the So for Q2, we were showing, we spoke to the board about a month ago, and we were showing a $571,000 gap or deficit. And I'm going to walk you through those reasons why and what we're doing to mitigate that gap so that we come into balance by the end of the year.
Okay,
So-
Courtney, can I ask you a favor? Would you just mind referencing whatever page you're speaking to, and just for the public, maybe just say what the title of the slide is so that we can follow along?
Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm looking through now and I see that the pages start.
I think the PDF pages are not numbered, so maybe just if you say what the title of the slide is, that would be fine. For the public, again, I think we start with your memo on page 45, but we can, whatever spreadsheet you're looking at, just the title would be helpful.
Sure. Thank you, Lori. So I'm on page 45 of the packet, it's the first page of the memo, and I'm gonna just talk through some of the major points that we're driving that gap that we are projecting as of the second quarter. So it's been a unique year for us in terms of the state legislative impact, student needs, and the needs for additional sections in elementary school. And I'm just going to talk to you about a few of those big gaps that we had starting at the beginning of the year. So the first was change in legislation that requires the district to support students to receive programming through the end of their 22nd birthday for those that are identified with special education needs. This was what we call an unfunded mandate. So the state mandated that legislatively at the end of the year, so we weren't able to plan for that in the budget. And it had an impact of more than $600,000 that we have to make up throughout the year in order to come to budget balance. It was about 9 children, I believe 9 students remained in district as a result. So what that did is it extended, normally they're in care with us through the year before they turned 22, and it extended it to the end of the year. So that caused those additional 9 students to be able to stay with us at the end of that year. The second was related to staffing needs as a result of, we had greater than projected enrollment at the elementary level. What that means is, when we have certain class sizes that we maintain, and depending on where families reside, it results in additional sections in first, second, or third grade. So we needed to expand those additional sections. In addition, in response to identified student needs, we added what's a CLC classroom. That's also it's a cost avoidance ultimately, but it was an unbudgeted item. Seeing higher needs in students. So the reason it's a cost avoidance because when we serve these youth in district, it's less expensive than sending them out of district. District staff was also increased due to greater social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health needs of our students identified through the PPT process. I wanted to mention that all of these are covered in our next year's budget as we enter into the budget conversations with the town, and we've gone over with the board. The board has approved the budget to go forward, and it includes the staffing needs associated with what I'm about to describe. We saw an increase in student referrals and prevalence rate post-pandemic very significantly. Specifically, we added a program director of elementary special education. We have 11 elementary schools that have 728 students that have disabilities. This represents 18% of our students as identified with special needs. It was critical to have that position because we also have 8 CLCs at 4 locations, TLC, and 6 to 8 secondary has 342 students identified with only 1 program director. And the high school has 601 students with 2 program directors. So I apologize that that's a lot of information and it might not be so exciting, but as a result of that, we did add a program director. Finally, in personnel, we had a really large increase in need for substitute services above and beyond what we had been seeing in the past trends. Last year, we did see a big increase in sub needs. We thought it was an anomaly and temporary, and it looks like that trend has continued into this year. we're seeing a lot more leaves of absence, long-term leaves of absence, and Mr. Testani can talk greater depth about that if you,
Sure.
yeah.
So in the past, for example, last year, when we presented this last month to the Board of Education, we were at the same number of people that required maternity or paternity leave in all of last year already in January of this year. So those long-term absences obviously come at a cost. We have many others that are scheduled in the coming months as well, so that number is only going to climb. It's very problematic, especially at the high school level, because instead of putting in a substitute teacher, usual practice is to have current staff within the department pick up an extra class. We want a certified teacher in the content area providing instruction to students rather than a sub that is just a novice. When that happens, it incurs at a cost of 20% of the individual salary as an increase. So as you can imagine, this becomes quite expensive. As Courtney touched on, just general overall long-term absences outside of maternity and paternity leave is also on the rise. Those are things for serious illness and injuries that we just couldn't forecast. So we're being able to provide the teaching and learning in the classroom to students, but it is coming at a cost that we did not anticipate. Hopefully this is something that we can control as we move forward. Obviously, illness and serious illness is not something that we can anticipate. As you all are aware, through the pandemic, I'm sure a lot of folks did put off maybe having children. Now that we're out of the pandemic, they are now starting their families or continuing to add to their families. So we wish them the best. But again, substitute costs that not anticipated.
There's often been an inverse relationship with our staffing. So as we have more absences, the staffing money transfers into the subline. So we did see fluctuations over the years, but it was, an anomaly this year to be higher than projected. So we're looking into that and accounting for it for next year as well. But that impacted us by about $600,000 in our budget for that item alone. As we talked to you about, year end, I think we talked through the budget cycle with those that have been here before about, we do multi-year planning on our physical plant so that in the years where, for example, last year we had a savings on the personnel side because we had a lot of vacancies in the paraeducator lines, for example. We were able to do some projects at year end because of that. And this year is a year where we have higher than anticipated personnel needs. We're happy that we're able to do those projections and see it early enough to where we can put in place some mitigating strategies so that we can come into balance by year end. I'll pause there if it's okay through the chair to see if there are questions on the first page of the memo.
Yeah, thank you. Questions, Mr. Curley?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that summary. Yeah, I didn't see anything in the backup, and maybe I missed it when you were talking about it, but the general theme was you've added headcount, which you've accounted for in your budget submission for the upcoming year, but it was not part of your current year, so now it's a challenge. What I'm not seeing is how many headcount are we talking about? Do you have a table or schedule that talks about the actual headcount?
There are FTEs in the schedule on page, but I don't know if it should. It would put one of three, but it would be 40 some odd. One of 31.
Page 73 in the PDF, I believe.
Yeah, page 73 in the PDF. Okay, so the schedule is called Statement of Account, Summary by Major Classification and Summary Object. And that does include an FTE summary as of a point in time. So the way that we talk about the budget is we have an adopted approved budget, which is the Board of Ed approved the budgeted headcount of 14965. And then we have a current modified, it's called the modified FTE, and that's the budgeted changes that we spoke about, having to do with the special ed director, having to do with the enrollment needs that we have, for example. And then we have a column called current actual FTE, and that would be at that point in time of active headcount that were in place against those budgeted buys. So our projections are based on assumptions for the current modified budget. So it includes assumptions about vacancies, leaves of absence, unpaid and paid returning, for example. So the additional headcount, I believe, was 25 when we were talking about it through the budget process. It's a little bit more here, so
It looks like 29, right?
29. Mhm. And of that 29, I believe that 7 of those are FTE increases without dollar increases, and I'll explain that. That's our paraeducators. So when the board authorized an increase to the paraeducator contract, so through a memorandum of understanding, we have overall a net number of paraeducators. A portion of them were funded with grant funding and a portion on the Board of Ed side. The portion that was on the grant side remained the same. The funding didn't change for them. On the Board of Ed side, when we funded the MOU, we funded the increase to salary for those grant positions as well. So year over year, the dollars don't change, but the FTE had to go up to be able to account for that overall net impact. In addition, there were, I think, about 4 other grant positions, I don't have it in front of me, that came from grants. Yeah, the data coordinator came over from a grant. So there were a couple others that were grant adjustments as well. Yeah.
So just to follow up on that, thank you. Just trying to boil it down layman's terms here. So it sounds like you've added roughly 29 headcount from the approved budget. You're over by roughly $600,000. It's primarily staffing related. What is the process for adding those headcount? Is it at your discretion, Mr. Testani, or do you go to the Board of Ed, or how does that work?
So that's basically at my discretion. However, I want to just step back for a second. So in terms of the current actual, it's not reflected as 29 total. We have controlled any of the increase in need. So for example, when we opened up the CLC classroom, that's a teacher, that's 7 paraprofessionals, and that's also an ed trainer. So it's 9 staff members to open that classroom. We opened 5 sections of elementary school, which then caused an increase also to PE, art, music, and so forth. We did add slightly at the high school and middle school level for increased need in music and some of the others. So those were just basically in terms of addressing, according to our head count, our class size regulations that the Board of Ed has adopted over the years. So it's really to maintain and to provide what is necessary based on the need of the district. As Courtney mentioned, we did budget all those in the upcoming year. But as you will see when we do present that budget at a later time, I don't want to get too far into it. You will see the increase in headcount, but the increase in dollars has also been offset as well. The ask is not as great based on the number of folks that are added into the budget, because we did look for offsets to make sure that we did not increase the budget at a rate that would be unacceptable to the rest of the town bodies, but also not.
I think agree. That's a conversation for another night, but
Correct.
understanding those offsets would be very important at that. Okay. I'm all set. Thank you.
Might I just add one brief thing? So it was grant reductions and transfers for total grant reductions. We were fortunate that we avoided the fiscal cliff that a lot of municipalities are seeing because of excellent planning, I think, from my predecessors. these other districts, like really large drop-offs because of the loss of federal funding next year. Anyway, but this was for grant reductions or transfers. The 6.6 paras that I mentioned that were funded, but the FTE headcount increased. 2 that were, we'd call cost avoidance. 6 related to the elementary class size adjustment. And then another 1.2 for secondary enrollment adjustments. And then we also did add 3.4 psych, social worker, and guidance counselors associated with really massive student need that we saw at the overall schools district-wide.
Second question.
Thank you. Mr. Matola?
So on the, related to the class size, did I see something that, did the board look at that policy and to try to give you some more discretion about, when I say you, the superintendent, more discretion with respect to if you're over on the class size, then you don't necessarily have to hire another.
We are currently, as the policy committee is looking at some new policy, to look at some dates as to when, with the additional enrollment, we would trigger or not an extra section based on enrollment increases. That has not been finalized yet.
It's the policy committee's looking at that right now.
Correct.
All right, so there's not, right now, we still are operating under the guidelines that the board put in place, I guess, many years ago, right?
Correct. The additional sections we did add was prior to the start of school. If there was any increases after school had started, we stayed firm at my discretion, as you just mentioned, not to cause any disruptions to classrooms that had already been established, teachers, students.
Collapse.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we did not do anything this year after the first day of school. Maintained strong, but anything that was done over the summer, we did make those additional sections, but.
We used the demographer's projection, that we've been using, so formerly SLAM, Malone McBroom, now SLAM, demographer projections, and then update those as enrollment comes in at the start of the year. And we have a class array that shows how many kids are enrolled by school, by section, by grade level as well.
So opening up that one CLC classroom, it adds 9 staff members. Right?
It adds 9 staff members because of the complex needs of the students that are enrolled in the classroom. But again, sending 10 students out district,
About 1 million.
yeah, million or more based on with all the transportation costs and everything else.
And you don't have any problem finding employees to TEs when to find them, or is it difficult to hire?
I would say I have a wide range of people in my network that I can, when there's need here in Fairfield that way.
Thank you. I'm all done.
Thank you, Mr. Matola. Mr. Walsh?
I just wanted to follow up Mr. Matola's question. You need 9 people. And what's the total cost of that? Build the CLC classroom.
Teacher, yeah.
Yeah, the teacher, based on experience, will just say on average 85 to 90,000 with benefits, unless it's a more experienced teacher. And the paras at
31 now, 31 plus 29.
Yeah.
So about 60K with the benefits for the parents, on average. Ed trainer, about 70K. How many ed trainers do they have? in the
One.
CLC? Just one. But the teacher's actually closer to about 100, I think, with the benefits.
depends where we hire them at.
160, another 70.
Yeah, how many pairs? It's 2 pairs in the CLC.
But no, the ideal, they've been hiring at 7 or we've been hovering around 5 because we don't feel 7 is necessary unless the enrollment goes a little bit higher. But even if we went at 7, so that's 420, 520, a little over 600,000.
600,000.
for a classroom rather than the million plus if we sent them all. If we could find the slots.
About how many students is in a CLC?
That is
And it's
the most we put in.
Mr. Mancusi, our Executive Director of Special Ed and Student Services Supports, has done a presentation about the cost avoidance, and he shows the cost of a CLC classroom versus typical service that we would send a child out for, that we can also include in our budget conversations if that's of interest.
Yeah, you said that was coming, so that's going to be presented during the budget.
Yeah,
And the transportation obviously costs within the district are much lower than it would be when we send kids out. So those transportation costs, a lot of those would be private transportation for each child, which can be, as you can imagine.
so
Mr. Walsh, do you mind if I just follow up on your question there? And the question about the cost avoidance, when that analysis is done, are we taking into account infrastructure costs? Because obviously additional classrooms, we keep hearing that our buildings are crowded, we don't have enough room. And I feel like we look at the cost of tuition versus, keeping students in district. I'm not disputing that that's the appropriate thing to do. I'm asking though, if we really have the analysis that's taking into account all these costs. Or at least if when we're doing the analysis, we should address that, because obviously, space is at a premium, and our, the way we utilize space is different. So it feels like the physical buildings are also a cost here that needs to be considered, and the space that we're devoting toward this. So I just think it needs to be analyzed if we're going to get a true understanding of what this looks like.
With all due respect, I think we could probably put a small dollar figure on that. I don't know if we can quantify the cost on the educational and emotional benefits of keeping a child in their neighborhood or their district school and then putting them on a bus or in a car or van for 45, 50 minutes to send them somewhere else. So I think.
And I'm not disputing that. Yeah, nor am I suggesting we should do that. I very much understand it. All I'm saying is, to the extent we're doing an analysis of the cost avoidance, I think it's important to understand, because this is going to catch up with us in terms of additional infrastructure costs and needs as we look at our facilities. And I just think it's helpful to understand that trend and what that produces, because otherwise we can't plan for that. So, I fully appreciate your point there. And I don't suggest in any way that we're not doing the right thing, but we also have to be realistic in terms of how this impacts us, I believe, and our future facilities needs. So.
Yeah. I think we can take a look at that. We can also see where those kids would have been districted to, what schools and what classrooms, to see if there'd be an offset in the additional sections they may trigger had they stayed and not been identified with severe special needs as well.
Okay.
So.
All right. And I apologize, Mr. Walsh, I don't know if you were done, but I'll turn it back to you.
No, I'll follow up on that question. For this CLC that we're talking about right now,
One,
did it cost us any money?
no,
We had a classroom available.
we did.
Where was it?
Jennings.
Okay. If it had been 2 classrooms, would you have been able to find space for it?
Yes.
Because we have extra classroom.
Find a classrooms at a school somewhere.
Okay. So right now, that doesn't seem to be a problem.
Not right now.
Cost us 0.
no, staff.
Just the
Just
staff. Correct.
Or the facility, 0.
Correct.
So that shouldn't really go into the analysis. It's 0. Or you could put the number down, but it's 0.
And I think it also should be pointed out that we need to assume that there are spaces to take these CLC students out there if we wanted to outplace them, which is not always the case.
Correct.
If we wanted to outplace our entire CLC program, we would not be able to do that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure I agree with Mr. Walsh's statement. We may have the room now, but, I think this gets to the question. And again, I'm not disputing that this is the right thing to do, but there's a question that keeps coming up about the fact that we need additional space while we have declining enrollment. And I suspect that this is a part of it. You know, we've heard that we just utilize our buildings differently. You know, we need more space, and we need more space for different reasons now. And at some point, you know, if this trend continues and if enrollment increases, you know, this becomes an extra school at some point. You know, this is, so this is why I'm asking, you know, it's not just what we're looking at today, it's what this trend means in terms of our future infrastructure costs and how we plan for that, particularly if we've got very large infrastructure projects on the horizon, because, you know, we just need to understand what direction this is heading in. So that's the reason for my question. And I'll reiterate once again, I am not in any way implying that we are not doing the right thing by keeping these students in district, because I'm very supportive of that, as I assume everyone else in the room is. All right, so questions. Jim, go ahead.
I'm done with my questions. Mary has her hand up.
I'm sorry, Mary, go ahead. Yeah.
Just a follow-up. So if we want to run a special program, do we ever take out of district students for tuition from another district? In any of these CLCs?
Oh, no, the CLCs, yeah.
Just Walter Fitzgerald, that type of situation.
That would be,
And we get reimbursement for open choice. We participate in the open choice program, so that's another out of district, not for the CLC, but we do have youth that come from out of district.
So if the children that come from open choice, if they have to develop special needs, do they then go into the CLCs?
We bill, yeah, we bill
Because we're committed to
anything above, we bill this in. Charlton, also,
Yep. Mhm.
so in addition, so we talked about the challenges that we had this year, and we're fortunate that we were able to identify them early on. And we have some savings on the transportation side, because unfortunately, we don't have the drivers that we'd like to have. So as a result, our contract is such that we pay when we utilize the runs. So we have some savings that we are anticipating in the transportation to offset some of these needs. In addition, we have some favorability on the utility side as well, because we did budget when rates were sky high, also with the town. And we're seeing that obviously has come down this year. We still have a couple more months to go. And, you know, this didn't account for the most recent winter storm, but we're confident that we can manage those needs. We did pause on a few projects to make sure that we have funds to come to balance by year. And we're confident that we're monitoring the program that that's the case. In addition, we are also comfortable that when we get into the budget cycle with the town, that we've accounted for a lot of these items in our projections for the budget for next year.
Okay. And can I just ask a question? So back to Mr. Curley's point and the additional headcount of 29. So on a net basis, we're over by $500,000 or something. I mean, 29 people in total. I'm assuming that cost of that is in the several millions. And I know one of the things that would be helpful, obviously there are offsets here that are offsetting the cost. You just mentioned utilities and transportation, and maybe we're going to defer some maintenance. And I don't know if it's in here and I missed it, but one thing that might be helpful going forward, just to understand all this, is to maybe get a little clearer picture of how these, what these offsets are and how they specifically address the overage of personnel. And the reason I ask, it just strikes me that it sounds like the personnel needs are long-term in nature, and some of the offsets may be seasonal or short-term or just deferred costs. And so that I think would be helpful to understand, maybe in more of a snapshot format, so we can really see what we're doing here. It's good, I suppose, that we've got some offsets, but these are not, and I know you've addressed the personnel issues in the budget. You've said you've done that. But I think it would just maybe provide a clearer picture going forward if would sort of see how all these things are working and to what extent these offsets are really just temporary or deferrals, if that makes sense.
Sure, it does, yeah. So I directed a page directly after the memo, just one page is in, it's called Fairfield Public Schools Statement of Account, Major Classification Balances. And basically, we did this so that we could monitor how we're doing quarter by quarter, so we could changes in any given category. So the high level, and so the high level summary shows that $2 million gap in personnel that I mentioned. We have some favorability for fixed charges, that's mostly in health insurance. We typically, when we project the health insurance, we take for the next upcoming year, we take the active staff where they are currently enrolled and then apply an attrition factor to it, roll that forward. And then in addition, make any adjustments for any pluses or minuses and hiring changes that are coming up in the budget. That actually we're off a little bit in that because people chose more single and single plus one than we did because people chose the family coverage. So we have some favorability there. That does fluctuate year over year. We monitor the trend on a 5-year basis, 10-year basis, even on a monthly basis, so that we can see what's happening. So we're comfortable that the budget that we're presenting for next year covers all of our current staff plus the projected staff that we have going forward. Look forward to presenting that as part of our budget conversation. In pupil personnel, there's a minor surplus. That's because the way that we show these major categories to you here, that includes transportation. So the special ed favorability in transportation is shown here. Really, there's a net gap in pupil personnel. If you go to the next page, you would see that on line 20, where it totals to that 183, negative 367 on the special education expenses. Line 16, it's offset by a positive 524 for transportation. Again, that's because we had those youth that stay with us. Also, there's other things that are happening in special ed. For example, excess costs is much lower, our reimbursement from the state, another unfunded mandate that the state has given us, but we make that projection in real time so that we're able to account for it. But there's a gap there, not a big gap, but I wanted to thank the Board of Finance and the town for funding us rightly in special education so that this isn't worse of a scenario. So anyway, but that's the detail on that line. School expense, we're usually pretty flat there. The schools spend the money that we give them on a per pupil allocation to do things that are extracurricular with students, books, and all the things that we need for the classrooms. The support expenses, some of the offsets you can see, program assessment, instructional materials, PD. Those are things that we do and we need to do for students, but we can pause on some of it if we need to, because, our cycle is such that it's a multi-year cycle and we're able to still keep moving forward. And so those are some of the offsets in that area for a favorability of 452,000. And then again, you mentioned maintenance, operations, and transportation. If you go to the next page, you can see about projecting positive balance of 443,000. That's because you can see that maintenance service line. We're holding aside 496,000. To see how we turn up in utilities, to see if we can do the major projects that we do this year, and we should be doing this year, but we paused on them temporarily. Capital outlay, special ed equipment. We'd like to be able to purchase that equipment. We have a multi-year plan, confident that we could account for it next year where we need to, and hopeful that, we're favorability and utility balance. Yeah. So that's a little bit of the detail for the offsets. Then the following page just summarizes it by type. So our board would like to see it also in these categories. So personnel types, special ed, general ed, transportation. So you could see line by line where the offsets are that are interest. That's coming in at negative 71 as opposed to negative 2 million.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And maybe, so to the extent, let me just ask a specific question. So let's just say, for example, that you're going to have to defer maintenance and capital projects to make up for the personnel overage here. Are those things accounted for in next year's budget, those deferrals, or not?
No, in any given year, because the Board of Ed budget is on a year-by-year basis and we don't have that reserve, you know, the 2% reserve fund, we've got to be very, very careful about planning multi-year so that we have a list of the board already created of our major maintenance projects that are not capital projects, but they're part of our major maintenance program. So
Okay, no,
last,
I think you answered me. So I think basically we end up, you know, to the extent that these become the offsets, you sort of end up with a permanent deferral, if you will, because, you know, if you do these things next year, then something that was going to be done next year gets pushed out. Okay.
yeah, and similarly, it gets pushed up if we have a favorable year. So last year, for example, we had a surplus in personnel. So we were able to do some of the projects, prepay some of the projects, or not prepay, but tackle some of the projects earlier.
A lot of paving last year.
A lot of paving. People were happy. A lot of tree removal, just a lot of maintenance around the buildings that was deferred for a long time.
Okay. Mr. Gerber, did you have a comment?
Quick question, the 2 million shortfall in Q2, is that your run rate through the end of the year? I just want to make sure. So each quarter you're going to have 2, or is that going to increase?
No, it doesn't increase. That's the projection for the whole year.
Oh,
So
that's a projection for the whole.
correct, yeah. We do the actual, so we do include the encumbrances in the backup. But in addition, we project. So for example, when we have leave of absences that are paid and unpaid, the unpaid leave of absence, we're accounting for when they'll return to work.
Okay.
We're accounting for things like subs and the hourly that aren't coming. So we do a projected amount. So to answer your question, that's the full,
Oh, right.
all in, full year projected amount. Yep.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Curley?
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for that, going through the categories. That was very helpful. But I guess I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Your run rate right now is roughly $572,000 unfavorable. You're planning on making that up through incremental savings that's not represented in this number here from drivers, utilities, and pausing a few capital projects.
Correct, yeah.
The capital projects are already favorable by 567,000. So if you're going to make up another 570, round numbers, you're talking about $1 million deferral on the maintenance line, which, and if I heard correctly, that's a permanent deferral.
No, sorry.
Oh, so yeah,
Yeah, so what's not accounted for here because we're showing no savings in utilities. So I'm counting on additional utility savings that I'm not reflecting here. The maintenance is deferred here, so that's why you show the positive. There's no additional maintenance deferral. So the items that are not accounted for in the gap, because we wanted to be conservative and true, we didn't have an estimate at the time for the utilities and also the bus drivers. So we're seeing the last month, additional favorability. It's not captured
The
here.
favorability continued to grow, but the deficit will not.
and the deficit will shrink, right?
The deficit will shrink, yes.
So on the capital maintenance side, do you expect that 567 favorable to grow?
No, we expect to be able to spend that out also, but we're holding it aside from conservative because we felt that was prudent and the right, given where the numbers lie with the rest of the budget.
That helps me understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Other questions, is that Mr. Stark?
Yeah.
Yep.
Remind me what the 1.5 million unencumbered balance would have been for in personnel. Is that like a cushion?
The 1.4,
We'll put, yeah, it's on
Would have
page 73 of the backup, but you can also calculate it
Wage
on
reserve.
page 71 of the backup. If you take the year-to-date actual in personnel, 49.6, and you add it to the encumbered.
Yeah.
76.2, that's
Uh-huh.
125-ish million. Right, so what was the unencumbered balance there? What would that have been for if you weren't hiring these extra people? Was that like a cushion?
It's not a question, I'm not sure. So the expenditures and the encumbrances are real live people that are on board with us. It's, you started today and the rest of the year, your salary is encumbered.
The unencumbered would be like people you haven't hired yet.
Well, it's a few things. So it's our part-timers because we don't encumber the part-timers. So we have to project to the part-timers. It's returns from leave of absence because they're not encumbered if they're on an unpaid leave. So you'd be surprised. It is a significant amount of money. So we do project for that, for their return date. And then we do adjustments because sometimes they have a return date and they don't return. And so we know what that is historically. So we trend that as well. So it includes, the part-time, mainly the part-timers, the substitutes. We have to project additional for because they were pay as we go for the substitute. Yeah. That's the bulk of it, yeah.
Are you all set, Mr. Stark?
I am.
Okay. Other questions from the board? All right. John, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna say thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Courtney, I wonder if I know that you said you handed out responses to the audit comments. We don't really have that on the agenda tonight. And since the backup didn't go out in advance, let me reach out to you. We have our internal audit discussion that got pushed out to our March meeting. So maybe we can figure out how to get you back and discuss that with the board when we go through the other audit comments. But I can be in touch on that.
Sure, I apologize. I got the date mixed up, but I'm happy to share it and I apologize. So we'll publish it in our Friday packet as well for the public. So they'll have it in advance of that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. Appreciate you being here.
Everybody.
Okay, we are going to move to item 5 to review the town fiscal year 24 Q2 financial update. The materials for this item begin on page 109 of the posted backup, and we have Ms. Caitlin Bossy, Town Controller, here to take us through this item. So welcome, Caitlin, and I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. We'll start as always with the summary. The projected net estimated operational variance, again on page 129. There's some large numbers on here. I'll be seeing for the first time this year. Basically, it's a $6 million swing from Q1 to Q2 due to two factors. One being the lines on the revenue side, current, prior, and interest is now we're looking at a favorable $1 million or so when we were expecting unfavorable about 500,000 as of Q1. And that is due to a tax sale that has been initiated by the town through the tax collector and the town attorney. So we're projecting to possibly receive about $2.5 million. There's about 13 properties on the list that are over 12 years delinquent in their taxes. So they're between 12 and 15 years delinquent. And as you guys may or may not know, after 15 years, it's not collectible. So the town starts losing money at that point. So there are 13 properties, one of which has already paid out a little over $200,000. So that's the swing in the top line there. Again, not really affecting current, but it's the prior and interest number that is now looking to be favorable. We are on track with our current collected. We've collected 77.63%. Last January was about 76.89. So we're trending a little bit higher than last year. But as you guys know, the collection rate also increased in the budget from 98.9 to 98.93 in this fiscal year. So really, that's current, we're not really projecting a large variant. It's more on the prior and interest piece is this $1.5 million or so swing from an unfavorable Q1 to a favorable $1 million in Q2. So that's a large piece of our increased estimate from Q1 to Q2. Does anyone have any questions on that, or should I keep going with the revenue pieces?
Can you maybe just clarify I wasn't aware of the 15-year.
That's a state statute.
Okay, so after 15 years, we stop, what does that mean? We can't pursue collections, or we can't continue to accrue interest?
We cannot accrue interest, I believe. So we actually write it off.
Oh, okay. So at the 12-year mark, we start to pursue these. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, and I think Phil just popped on too. Phil's obviously involved in part of the tax sale as well. So Phil, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so after 15 years, I think the tax debt's uncollectible, not just the principal. So we lose our lien interest. So it's very important to collect before 15 years are up. The tax collector identified, we are at 15 or very close to it on some properties. And the ones in this initial sale are all 12 or more, because that is a good time when you'd want to start pursuing your lien rights so you don't lose them.
Okay, thank you. Mary, do you have a question?
Oh, no, it's Amy.
Oh, Amy, sorry.
Thank you. When you said, do you actually take possession of the property and sell it, and we keep the revenue generated from the sale of the
If it
property?
gets to that point, there will be a sale date. Phil, you could probably talk to this, I believe in May or June.
So there's a series of notices that go out. The phase we're at right now is the tax collector sending out notices. There is then a quasi judicial sale. It's outside of the court, where the property is advertised at an auction and an auction's held. The town hopefully will not take title to any of these properties. These are selected for the purpose of not taking title. There's strategic reasons to not do that in a tax sale, but the goal is to get paid. The town, if there is no bidder and we have to bid our interest at the sale, we will be the high bidder and we'll take title.
And then you sell it on the market?
And then we would have to sell it on the market. But that's typically for properties that you're doing a tax sale for. That's not the goal, and that's not the outcome. If the intention is to take title, we would do a tax foreclosure, which is a judicial process. It's a different process.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Ms. Ruggiero. Okay, Caitlin, you want to keep going through the list?
Question, Mr. Walsh has a question.
Oh, sorry. Jimmy, you had a question on the property tax?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Mr. Pierce, once we take over the possession of the property, then we have to evict the people out of the house, correct?
Yes.
Or sell it, because we can't be selling a house with people inside of it, right? So we'd have to evict them and all their possessions, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on this item or? Okay, go ahead, Caitlin.
Okay, the largest number on this page is revenue item number 2, the investment income. We're now projecting a $5 million favorable variance to budget for fiscal 24. As you guys know, rates are increasing. How we got that number was we looked at actuals through December, which is $6.1 million is actual. The budget, as you guys know, is 5.1. So we're already over budget by $1 million, and that includes the mark to market as of December, because we do that quarterly. How we came up with the projection from January to June is we reached out to our financial advisor, Janney, and he gave us a projection by month for January through June. We also looked at our 2 other large cash accounts, one being STIF and one being our money market. And given the rates where they are right now, which are a little over 5%, really, STIF's at 5.4 at the moment. We're projecting another 4.5 million coming in, which would be an actual of like 10.5. So we're projecting an actual favorable variance to 5 million. Don't forget, you guys, we were also favorable last year in 23 by like 3.7. So this is more trending up. Frank is here because that clearly kind of mandates into the budget discussion for 25. So I don't know if you want to add anything or.
No, just if anybody has any questions about any of the calculations, I can answer them. But
Yeah, I don't think we want to get into the budget discussion, but so this is, so this, can you just maybe help us understand? And I realize that we got these numbers with Janny's assistance, but what are they contemplating in terms of rates, particularly on the short-term portfolio? I mean, are they set $5 million overage? Assume that rates are going to be decline, short-term rates are going to decline through the remainder of the fiscal year, or stay flat, or what?
I mean, 20%, I'd have to look at the maturity dates of the portfolio, but you know, for 80% of the portfolio in the fiscal year, that the rates are locked in because only 20% of the portfolio matures every year. So their expectation on the rate changes would only affect the mark to market unrealized gain or loss.
I guess I was referring more to the stiff account, Frank, and the short term, because that's about half of our cash, right? Is in the short term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could give you what's let's see, 2024 through June, they're at about the projection that I have here, that through June, it would be about 4.6% is their projection for overnight rates.
And we're earning how much now?
5.4.
Okay.
Year end?
What?
Did they do that calculation at year end?
So the overall, they did the calculation for for June 2024. I want to say this was like maybe a month and a half ago. So I think the Fed signaled something, you know, I think they signaled differently on rates that they're not going to move them. So, you know, it could change, but this was just at the time we did this.
Fed futures are signaling a 5.1% rate now.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe they did that before the.
They did it before Powell said, you know, we're not going to touch anything, I think is when they gave us this.
Makes
No, but that's only you know, there's the Janny piece and there's the stiff piece and then there's just the interest on our cash.
Okay, thank you. So bottom line, you guys are comfortable that this $5 million is a solid projection?
Yeah, you know, assuming that the cash flows on the money market side stay the same and what we're expecting, you know, and the rates are about where they are right now. Yeah, we could make that assumption.
Okay. And that's just, I was just trying to, we do have some downside risk from current rates built into this $5 million overage. Is what I'm hearing. So, okay. All right.
Okay, the next numbers aren't so significant in terms of the change from Q1 to Q2. Conveyance maybe slightly unfavorable due to less refinances, so projecting a slight under budget of 115,000. Building permits, fire marshal fees, basically on target to reach their budgeted amounts. Park and rec revenue went up just slightly from Q1 to Q2. Again, more of the same. The beach and the parking kind of stayed the same, but golf got a little bit more favorable due to the warmer winter months. State revenue, slightly a little bit more. Those are just due to actuals that came in. There's a sheet that kind of gets you to the 1897. And the other went slightly, we're only looking at 22,000 favorable. And if you look at your revenue, kind of the sheets with all the comments, there's just some ins and outs that kind of are going back and forth on some revenue lines. So really the Q1 to Q2 swing in revenue is about 6.5 million favorable due to the top two lines. Nothing else really changed all that drastically. I'll continue on to the expense side. Vacancies, we're still looking at around the 600, which is really a lot of churn at this point. Not too many vacancies really opening up or are opened as of this moment. A couple DPW workers, and I believe there's 2 police, but really for the most part, the other stuff is pretty full. So it's just the people leaving, maybe having open position for a month or so, coming in at a lower salary. So that's the 600. Park and rec expense got a little worse from Q1 to Q2. Again, revenue kind of got a little more favorable. So as you can kind of surmise, some seasonal costs due to some events. We have a little bit of more OT in the park department. There's 2 people out on disability. So that was driving a chunk of that negativity. The next one, UI legal expense, is going to be another agenda item. I don't know if Phil wants to talk to it now or later. Basically for the UI monopoles project. So we're going to be requesting a transfer of 500,000, and Phil's going to talk about the details then. So there's a negative 500 that we didn't anticipate. And the other slightly favorable of 70, again, in the backup, there's just kind of some ups and downs. Really, for the most part, I think Horton touched on it too, with some favorability in the gas and electricity due to the warmer months so far. Well, not recently, but through December and January. So we're looking at about a $9.4 estimated increase in fund balance, because that includes the budgeted contribution to surplus of the 1.2.
Caitlin, why is that favorable by 1.2?
No, that's just the budgeted amount that's supposed to fall to surplus. So it's budgeted in the 24 budget. So we have an expense line, right, that no actuals go against, which is budgeted just to increase the surplus in case everything else netted to 0. So that we would keep our 11.75%.
Yeah, that was the hold harmless that we budgeted. We put the extra interest income, budget amount that if everybody recalls, the extra interest income that we budgeted, we directed it toward a budgeted contribution to surplus, just in case.
No, Madam Chair, I recall that. I guess my question, maybe I'm misinterpreting this schedule, but I'm looking at this as just a summation of the favorable and unfavorable to budget. So if this.
Okay, so if you want to look at that, Craig, go to the 8.1 then, really. So the 8.1 is really the operational variance. Maybe that helps through the revenue and the expense. And then the 1.2 was always projected to be part of the fund balance.
Got it.
Going to fall down. So that's why I'm saying it's 9.13. So you guys,
I'm thinking.
you're already thinking the 1.2 was already in the budget. So really it's the operational piece that.
So the favorable to budget is 8.1.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Which again, is basically due to those top 2 lines. That's 6.5 of it. So the rest is kind of ins and outs among the smaller lines.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Any questions from the board on expense items or anything else on this analysis? Okay, I don't see anything. All right. Well, thank you for the good news, Caitlin. We love surpluses.
Do. Unfortunately, we have a lot of uses for them now too, so.
Yes, we most certainly do. All right, so we can go ahead and move on to item 6, which is to hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $130,000 for the cost of a non-recurring capital project and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation." So this is a 10-year non-recurring capital item, which also requires RTM approval, and the full resolution is in the backup on page 152. The explanatory materials for this item begin on page 155. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Mottola, second. But Mr. Curley, thank you. Do we have any comments from the public on this item? I don't see any on the WebEx. Is there anyone in the room? Okay, so seeing none, I just want to make note that I believe we have Attorney Staffstrom here available this evening for questions on this item, as well as items 6 and 7. For item 6 specifically, let's see, who's going to present this? Is Chief McCarthy here for this one, or?
Chief Dunn, Deputy Chief Dunn.
Oh, thank you. All right, good to see you. Thank you for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Good evening. This is a request for a replacement of a fire apparatus repair shop truck, and it's consistent with the fire department's vehicle replacement program, which we've given to this board on occasion. Are there any questions?
Questions from board members? I can't, the room has been reduced to a tiny box, so if anyone has a question, just go ahead. I can't see any hands.
John's got a question.
All right, John.
Is this the only maintenance truck that you have for the entire department?
Well, we have the existing one. This is a replacement for that. So the existing is a 2012. But other than that, we do not have any other maintenance.
That's it.
needs.
You only have one of these maintenance. Yeah, it's called maintenance one. I was wondering if there's a maintenance two out there.
Right. No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Mary has
Mary.
one.
Mary, go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm with you, in the backup under, I guess, financing, it says it has an estimated useful life of 12 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's pretty much how we designate our fire apparatus. We have its primary life is 12 years as first line service, and then what we do is then we put it in a reserve status for the remaining 12 years. I know that sometimes is at odds slightly with how you decide to bond, but that's how we term it.
Well, this is a 10-year bond, so I think that's probably appropriate.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Leclerc. Does anyone else on the board have questions on this item, on the backup or on the resolution itself?
Madam Chair, I've got a question.
Mr. Curley, yep. Mhm.
And I'm sorry, I apologize if I missed it about it. I can't see it. Is this 130 on the Capitol waterfall?
Are you asking me, sir?
Yeah, or the first selectment, but was this on the, yes, okay, so.
Yes, it has been.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. Any other questions on this item? Okay, I see none. So we can go ahead and vote. All in favor of approving the resolution referenced in item 5 and set forth in the posted meeting materials, please raise your hand.
It's unanimous.
It is unanimous 8-0 with Mr. Testani not here. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we can move on to item 7. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, appreciate you
Bye.
being here.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to item 7. This is to hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $3,760,200 for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation." This is a 20-year bond. It requires RTM approval. The full resolution begins on page 159 of the posted backup. On page 163, there is a schedule, Exhibit A, which lists 8 separate projects under this bond resolution that aggregate to the total of the $3,760,000. And we'll go through those individually. The explanatory materials begin on page 164. So can I have a motion to hear this item? Ms. Ruggiero, second. Mr. Stark, thank you. Are there any I don't see anyone in the chat room. Any comments from the public on this item? Okay, so seeing none, we can start with the first item on the exhibit, which is for DPW, $350,000. And who is going to present this item?
I'm going to handle that one tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Calabrese. Welcome.
Thank you. Anthony Calabrese, Director of Parks and Recreation. Before you tonight, we're looking to hopefully get bonding on $350,000 to replace our South Benson Marina workboat. This is operated by the Department of Public Works. It's a 24.5-foot boat. It's a 1989, so 35 years old. It is essentially at the end of its useful life. We've been able to do a lot of repairs on it to keep the thing running, but it again, 35 years old. It's pretty much time to replace. This is the workboat that helps maintain all 6 miles of our beaches. This is the first boat that's breaking ice throughout the marina, throughout the channel to keep our fire and police boats active. And obviously, when we've got our fireworks, this is also the boat that transports the crew, sets the buoys for the swim lines, everything we need to do on the water. This is the boat that does that. So I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Calabrese. Questions from the board on this item?
Walsh has a question.
Mr. Walsh, thank you.
Anthony, thanks for being here. What's going to happen with the old boat? Are we going to sell it?
Typically, that is the procedure. The purchasing department handles that, and they normally use a site called GovDeals. And surprisingly, they have been able to sell a lot of old town material for pretty good prices.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other questions from the board? Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Calabrese.
Thank you.
So we'll vote on this item after we get through the other projects. All right, so next on Exhibit A, we have 5 separate engineering projects. Oldfield Road Bridge, Wakeman Lane, Old Road Bridge Construction, Green Farms Road Bridge, Meadowbrook Road, South Sound Barrier, McKinley School, Naps Highway, Neighborhood Connectivity. Welcome, Mr. Hurley. I guess you could just take us through each of these 5, and maybe we'll ask questions as you explain each one.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. The Oldfield Road Bridge design, town of Fairfield, the infrastructure is aging, and while the Connecticut Department of Transportation typically inspects the larger bridges, it was unable to do so with typical scope. So the town hired a consultant to perform underwater bridge inspection with a certified scuba diver. This special inspection confirmed that the bridge needs replacement. The bridge was built in 1935 and has scour below the wing walls and footing. While underwater, the inspector noticed spalling, chunks of missing concrete, and in some cases, exposed rebar. We're just waiting the final report from the consultant to compile a priority list of short repairs. And as I said, they mentioned recommending replacement. The request or the cost estimate is based on similar designs submitted to the state, but also includes contingency for permits, testing, and any grant requirements, as we're going to be trying to seek grant assistance on this as well. You also have to consider the tidal environment for this bridge. We will need Army Corps of Engineers, Connecticut Deep, and inland wetlands approval for this project. So I can answer any questions if anyone has any for this bridge.
Okay, questions on this item? Mr. Walsh.
Where's this bridge exactly? Is it near the marsh?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
And pay for the bridge. Are we going to be able to get grants for this to actually pay for the construction of the bridge?
Well, right now, according to the latest state data, it is eligible for a 50% grant, but it's a competitive grant. In about 2 months, the grant period is open, and the town intends to apply for the grant.
Okay. There's no federal grants available.
No, it's not federally eligible. We can still look for it, sometimes there's a tweak, but right now, in terms of what they call local or federal local bridge program, it's not federally eligible.
Can you give us a range of what you think it's going to cost?
What
is our 50% looking like?
The 50%, well, the estimate was 5.7 million for this bridge, so we would be responsible for 50%.
Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Mottola?
You have to have the design ready before you apply for the grant.
No, because there's a couple of different ones, and I just got off a call with MetroCog. This on some of the bridges we have are called lot SIP, where we pay the design and then they pay 100% of the construction. But this one, it's not eligible. It's too much for that. So, so we would get 50% for the design and 50% for construction. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Other questions on this item? And Bill, so these design costs, the 570,000, that gets us to the point where we have bidding documents in hand, is that?
It's correct.
Okay. All right. I guess we can move to Wakeman Lane.
Wakeman Lane, it's a bridge crossing over Sasko Brook. It is shared with Westport. The bridge will be a 36-foot clear span, and a 20-foot roadway and a 2-foot paved shoulder on each side. The bridge design right now is in the final design stages. The contract bid process will be handled by the DOT and the town of Westport. It is scheduled for late 2024 or early winter 2025 as required by the DOT. Proposed bridge will contain concrete rigid frame and deck with concrete abutments and footings. The bridge is rated in poor shape. The project will include labor, equipment, and materials for the bridge construction administration, inspection, testing, and state oversight. There's coordination with local and state permitting agencies. The town, this went to public hearing and inland wetlands just a few weeks ago, and conservation approved that. And then we just have to adhere to the DOT procedures to preserve the funding opportunities and reimbursement. Per the state statutes, both municipalities are responsible for repair and maintenance of the bridge. Westport will be the lead agency. And for the whole project, the town will pay Westport 10% of all eligible construction phase costs. The other 10% will be paid by Westport and 80% by the federal government. This is one of those federal bridges. The service life of the bridge is 50, but probably 75 years. And I'm here to answer any questions on that.
Okay, thank you. Questions on this project?
Okay, you can go into the next one because it's very
All
similar.
right. Okay.
James Highway, everything that I said applies to this bridge as well. It's a little bit of a larger bridge. It's a 60-foot clear span and a little bit wider, 32-foot roadway. This is what we call Kings Highway West and comes Greens Farm in Westport. Again, same thing. The contract bid process will be handled by DOT in Westport. It's scheduled for late 2024, winter 2025. It's also rated in poor condition. Right now, the latest estimates have it in the, and this would be for construction and inspection, in the $3.9 million range. And we added a contingency. Same situation here where 10% of the bridge costs would be the responsibility of the town of Fairfield. Westport is the lead agency, and it's basically the same as the other one. Just a little footnote is that these were accelerated bridge program design. It still took 4 years. And state actually in a pilot program actually paid for the design. So the town was able to save money on design for this and the other project as well. So, any questions I can answer?
Okay. Anyone from the board have questions?
Okay.
All right, Bill? Yeah.
Sure. The next one, Meadowbrook Road sound barrier. The sound barrier, this is the one that you get right before Home Depot there. The existing sound barrier needs replacement and requires significant and constant repairs. DPW has been out there probably 2 or 3 times in the last 4 years due to many complaints of the neighborhood. This would require replacing the existing sound barrier with a higher quality, more updated design timber sound barrier. The proposal includes a design and the construction, and the design would have the structure, the plans, permits and details and specifications. The wall is 375 feet long, 10 foot high, and currently has a swing door for pedestrian access. As mentioned in the previous Board of Selectmen meeting, the town should solicit assistance from our state representatives to investigate any additional funding sources. So I'm here to answer any questions on this one.
Okay, anyone? Ms. Leclerc.
Who built the original sound barrier?
That's a good question. That was before my time, hard to believe. But I believe it was the town as part of an economic development project. When Home Depot was when they were just getting the approval, they had blocked off Meadowbrook. It used to go all the way through. They blocked it off and kind of created a little pocket neighborhood behind the sound barrier there. And afraid of cut through traffic. Home Depot was the first Home Depot, I think, in Connecticut. And so the first couple of months that I was here for when it opened up, it was a high traffic area. And so they, as I said, using economic development money, they were able to kind of separate the neighborhood. And that was part of the project, I'm pretty sure.
Because this runs along 95.
That's right. That's right. Typically, the state will pay, the DOT will pay for the sound barrier if they widen the highway. So if they were to add, say, a fourth lane, then the state would be constructing that sound barrier as part of mitigation. But they usually don't go and pay for existing sound barriers or if there's no highway improvements. But as I mentioned before, we're going to try to talk to our state representatives, see if maybe we could get a cost share or maybe there's some grants available. It's a little bit different than a typical project, as you know.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Leclerc. Any other questions on this item? Okay.
The next one is the McKinley School Naps Highway Neighborhood Connectivity Project. We're seeking $850,000. We are hoping to get, again, the grants should be opening up pretty soon in the spring or summer. For this type of project, we're hoping to get $700,000 of grant money for this. And so the remaining would have to be bonded for this project. We toured the neighborhood and it would be replacing existing sidewalk sections on Naps Highway and creating new sidewalks on two of the, I'll call it the finger streets. Cardinal was one of them, and I have to admit right now the other street is escaping me. But we had gotten a petition from the neighborhood requesting that they wanted more accessibility to the Black Rock Turnpike area and of course the McKinley School. So we think this is a good candidate for this program, and we plan on submitting for grant application once it opens up.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mottola.
So are we bonding for $150,000 or $850,000?
That I would have to refer to Caitlin. Do you know on that?
We only bond for our share.
150.
This is really the authorization to spend the whole dollar amount, and then I'd only bond less the grant.
So what happens if we don't get the grant? Is that a possibility or are we pretty much guaranteed the grant?
You can never say we're guaranteed a grant unless we know ahead of time that we have at least a verbal commitment. On here, all I know is the state, in talking to the state, they think this is a eligible candidate, and being that it's in a dense area near a school, whole neighborhood doesn't have any sidewalks. I do agree with the state. I think this is a good candidate.
Lori, I think John Staffstrom has his hand up. Maybe let's clarify something.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify, as is our normal form, the first part of the resolution, paragraph 1, is actually the appropriation for the money. Paragraph 2 is actually the appropriation for the bonding of in this case would be the full amount because it ties back to the exhibit. But if you'll notice, the normal paragraph in paragraph 11 in your bond resolution says that if any grants are received, they are applied against the amount of the bonding that's available. So assuming that the grant was received, the amount of the bond authorization would automatically be reduced by the $700,000. If the grant came in after the town had already bonded, then that $700,000 would be used to pay the principal down on the bonds. So it actually is an appropriation resolution and a bonding resolution. I think the expectation that we're hearing tonight is that we don't expect we'll need to bond for that additional $700,000 that will come in through the grant.
Thank you. That's helpful. And for practical purposes, Bill, when we, by the time this gets off the ground and we're actually having to spend the money, what does the timing look like in terms of applying for the grant versus actually executing the project and spending these dollars?
Well, applying for the grant, I'm going to say it's within the next 6 months, as far as I can recollect for that. Again, depending on when the state actually releases it. And then they usually give you 2 months to apply, fill out the application. And they take a month or two to review, and then they award. But in that meanwhile, especially the way this is formatted, the $150,000 that we would bond no matter what, the authorization, we could start on the design. And so, boom, once we get, we get the grant, we would already have, quote, a shovel-ready project, close to it.
How long would it take?
The actual project, again, depending on the timeline, probably 6 to 12 months. Again, depending if it's the fall, you'd have to have probably a winter break unless we got a winter like we did last year. Work through it. But under normal circumstances, it's probably realistically 8 to 12 months, but again, depending on who the contractor is, what their work schedule is, it could be as little as 6 months.
After we get through design. Yeah.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. All right. So it seems unlikely we would be, bonding this 850 this year. We might bond the what we expect the outlay to be. Okay. Other questions for Mr. Hurley on this item or any of the other engineering projects? Okay, Bill, you had an easy night.
I know. It's refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Have a good day. Good night.
All right, appreciate it. Okay, so the next item in Exhibit A, Parks and Rec. This is the H. Scott Richardson Driving Range, Phase 2, $275,000. Back to you, Mr. Calabrese.
Thank you. Anthony Calabrese, Director of Parks and Recreation. Before you, I'm looking for Phase 2 of our H. Smith Richardson upgrades to our driving range, $275,000. Originally, this was supposed to be proposed as one project in the full 550. So anyway, here we are, Phase 2. We were able to split it. We have bids in hand. We are ready to go. I have not started any work on Phase 1 because the bids came in at 330. So I didn't want to start the project and not have secured the second part of the funding in order to finish the project. So even with the bid with 330, we're still going to be able to complete the project, the second part of the project with all the additional things that we were planning, short range area, and all of those other things that we've said we've had in here. Happy to answer any questions, but everything that I described in the backup is where we are. So.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, do you anticipate using part of this Phase 2 money to cover the overage on the Phase 1 bid, or are you going to rebid Phase 1? Okay.
No, no, the 330 is where that bid came in. We wanted to sole source it originally, but things happened and we were told put it out to bid. So we put it out to bid, and unfortunately it came in a little higher than we expected.
But you believe the Phase 2 and Phase 1 in the aggregate will still be within what you had originally contemplated for both phases?
That's correct.
Okay. Questions from the board? on this, go ahead and speak up. Until you speak, your box is too small for me to see who's got their hand up.
Madam Chair, it's Craig. I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Calabrese, thank you for that. Just a quick question on when you brought phase one to us last year, you had mentioned that the netting was not part of either phase, but would be covered out of your operating budget. Is that still the plan?
Yes, that's still the case.
And that work would be completed in conjunction with the upgrades at that time? It's just a question of where the funding would come from?
Yep, exactly.
That's the only question I had. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Other questions on this item from the board? Mr. Walsh.
Anthony, I got a little lost over you're talking about you have the bid for the 330, but you only have 275 for it. Now, if we give you another 275, how's the second 275 going to cover the rest of the things that you thought it was going to cost 275 to do in phase two?
Yeah, so phase two was we were supposed to have phase one done already, which would have been the concrete pad, the 20 bays that we have up there, the actual structure. Phase two was going to be the heating, the lights on top, just extra additional things like that, the design for the short range area, whatever site work was going to be needed for that short range. So the short range area is where we're going to cut back a little bit. We might have to just condense that. But I don't have the design on that yet, but I'm confident that we're going to be able to be within budget of the total 550, which is ultimately what I wanted to come forward with, was 550 last year, but was told to split it into 2 years. So that's where we are.
When you said lighting, you're talking about lighting of the interior of the bays, correct? You're not talking about lighting up.
We're talking about lighting. Yeah, we're talking about lighting the interior of the bays, but also lights on top of the structure the structure itself is only about 12 feet tall, and they're like lights that you would basically put on spotlights, for lack of a better term. I've talked to planning and zoning. There's no special permits or anything that are needed. These aren't big stadium lights that are going to be 40 feet in the air, like lighting up a football field. It's not that type of lighting. This is just enough lighting where you can stay outside when it's dark and hit down the course, down the range itself. They don't light up the whole range.
Will you be allowing people to hit off the driving range at night, like up to 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock?
No, the golf commission, it won't be that late. The golf commission was looking at maybe expanding hours till about 8 p.m. Obviously in the summer, that's not an issue, but we're looking to expand into the shoulder season. So really when it's a little colder out, we'd have those heated bays, they're covered, not when there's snow on the ground, but, so we could get some time really in December and maybe in February and March.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Other questions from the board?
Mary?
Ms. Leclerc.
I would like to ask about the useful life of the second portion. The first half, it sounds like it was concrete, so I could see the 20-year life. When we're talking about lighting, is that going to last us 20 years?
Well, the lights themselves I'm sure the bulbs won't last 20 years, but they'll be able to be replaced. You guys are all familiar with our lighting. I know down at the tennis center that's been there for almost 40 years, and we just replaced the bulbs. But no, we'll be okay within the 20-year range.
Let's sneak that in next.
Yeah. So you're saying the infrastructure for the lights is good for the 20 years?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that question, Ms. Leclerc. Other questions from the board? Okay.
Thank you again,
Anthony. Appreciate it. All right. So the last item in Exhibit A is Police Department, and this is the police building rehab, Phase 2, $500,000. Let's see, and who is here for this? Do we have the deputy chief or? There he is. Wasn't sure if I should expect you on the screen or, there we go. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. Deputy Chief Eddie Wye with the Fairfield Police Department. First, real quick, I want to point out a couple of things before I get into details. There was a typo in the original backups for phase one. It said that we had 300,000 in ARPA funds slated for this project. It's actually 350 and should have been 350 from the beginning. That was a mistake on our part. And the second thing is a terminology issue. In our 14-point summary, we use three phrases. We use 3 years, 3 projects, and 3 phases interchangeably, but that's not accurate since reading the report that we got from the architects. So moving forward, I'm going to use the architects' terminology. And their terminology is that we have 3 projects spread over 3 years. One of those projects has 4 phases. So the 4 phases are schematic designs, construction documents, bidding phase, and construction administration and oversight. So I prepared a further summary of the 14-point summary to give you a quicker overview of the building rehab project. So we planned out 3 projects over 3 years with funds earmarked in the amount of $350,000 for fiscal year 24, then $500,000 capital non-recurring for fiscal year 25, and $300,000 capital non-recurring for fiscal year 26. The need in a nutshell is that we have spaces that are in major disrepair. We have spaces that no longer effectively serve their original function. And we've had a steady increase in our roster of female officers. And it's a priority for us to accommodate them with adequate and appropriate facilities. The main goals of the overall project are to provide safe, functional, and accommodating facilities for our officers and any members of the public that we're hosting, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. Antonazi Associates was selected through the town bid and RFP process to be the architects, and we've been working with purchasing and the town facilities manager to move the project along. Fiscal year 25 is year 2, project 2, and we plan to renovate the women's locker room and adjacent women's bathroom, and we have to create a proper designated internal needs area. We intend to renovate the men's locker room and adjacent men's bathroom, and we intend to implement some long overdue safety upgrades to our booking and detention area. The maternal needs area is a given. Right now, we don't have one and are required by law to have one. As far as the locker rooms, the female locker rooms are old and rusty, and on top of that, as we increase our number of sworn female officers, we are almost at capacity with our facility. So we currently have 12 female officers. The capacity right now is for about 15. Okay. We plan on continuing to hire females. Increasing the capacity of the female facilities requires decommissioning our fitness center, which currently sits as a bridge between the female locker room and the male locker room. And once we start renovating the fitness area, it automatically affects the male locker room. The male lockers are original to the building, also old and rusty, and also at capacity. So it's more efficient and cost effective for us to tackle all of that as one project. The retention area project goal is to get us in line with best safety practices. We see a lot of departments with specialized fixtures that are essentially throw-proof, which is to the benefit of the officers and the detainees alike. We also have to provide a safe space and de-escalation space for detainees who are experiencing severe mental health emergencies and/or who are manifesting self-harming or other violent behaviors. And unfortunately, these types of behaviors are increasing exponentially every year. So again, everything we plan on doing is about safety, functionality, and appropriate accommodations.
Questions?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mottola.
Thank you for the material presentation. So just trying to understand where we are. First of all, 100% agreement that all these things need to be done. Certain about how we're going to build these things. So you have $350,000 in ARPA money, and I think based on the original intent of when we voted on this a year or so ago, that was to do lobby reconfigure, build shift commander over the classroom technology departments, to do those types of things, correct? Right. And then you say, in the body of the document here that surely estimates are conservative estimates, and architect is in need to best configure the space, search for any hazardous materials that may be present in structural considerations. So it's fair to say, a little unsure about what the costs are gonna be, correct?
Correct.
All right. So are you now, not you, the department in the town, are you using the ARPA money to get an architect to help with the design for all three phases? Is that what's happening right now?
Correct. So right now,
The costs?
what's happening now is we are utilizing the architects to give us to proceed with all of the phases of each project so that we can get those accurate estimates.
All right.
And those costs should run in the realm of about $233,000.
Okay, so you have plenty of money right now with the 350 from ARPA to do design for all three phases. All right. So I guess what I would say, and I don't know how other board members feel, 100% in favor of all this, but to me, it seems that it's more prudent to have the architect do what they're doing, so we get firm costs for all the phases of the project, and then you can come back and we can vote on them. I don't know if members of the board feel the same way. Is that, let me just ask you this, that if we went that, you're gonna be doing that anyway, right? So we didn't vote on this tonight, it's not delaying anything, because you still have to have the architect and the design done in order for you to really understand how much this is gonna cost, right?
Correct. And like it says, it was conservative estimates. We didn't, without having the architects come in, we didn't really have like a formal methodology. So we relied on less formal methodologies. Like a couple of years back, we had Donegan Systems come in to kind of give us a cost estimate of just materials to do both locker rooms. And 3 years ago, the materials were about $300,000. So you add in escalators and fees and labor, we figured $500,000 is an easy number for that, but
Who knows?
who knows? Could be less, could be more, within reason.
All right, I mean, I don't know if other board members want to weigh in, but.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Mottola, thanks for your comments. Maybe just to add on to that for some background, can you remind us how old this building is?
Oh,
It's an old building, 1970s. So
1970s. Okay, because I guess my question is, and like John, I'm fully in support of getting, we have this problem with a lot of our town buildings. They're older, they need repairs, they need maintenance. But what I'm interested in knowing, and this is similar to what John said, but maybe even a step further, is I know in the past we've had this process of, we have 3 phases here. And I guess what I'm not clear of is, are these like 3 Band-Aids, or do we do these 3 phases and then you've got a police station that's good for the next 20 years? I mean, the scope of the phases in the whole project, what I would like to know, and maybe this becomes part of what we look at when we consider this is, are we doing the right work to, rehabilitate this building in a way that, we're not going to have to touch it again? Or are we going down a path where we're, going to be doing, patches of $300,000 and $500,000 projects continually? And I don't know if you can address that or not, but like John, I think where I'm coming from is I would love to see, look, this is where we need to ultimately get to with this building. Maybe it's 1.1 million like you've got here. Maybe it's 2 million or 3 million. Maybe that happens over a certain period of time. But what is the right work that we're going to do, or that we need to do to this building to get it to where it needs to be? We figure that out, and then it gets extended out over whatever period of time is appropriate, operationally and cash flow wise. So maybe just if you could react to that.
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, could we make an argument that we need an entire new building? Sure. That's a 30-year project. So we're taking a look at what are the most pressing things that we will get the most value for our dollar. And obviously accommodating our female officers, that has to be done yesterday. So that's a really important project. And considering all of the locker rooms that we have now and the bathrooms that we have now are originals to the building, they've held up for 50 years. So yes, if we do those projects, we anticipate getting at least 20 years out of them. Other things like technology, it has to be updated, it has to be upgraded, but that's not something that inherently lasts 20 years. So one of the other phases includes updating the technology in our on-site training classroom. So while that is an important part of the projects, that's not necessarily something that is long-term and finished once it's done. But the other projects like upgrading the shift commander's office, I mean, right now, the shift commander for 2 out of 3 shifts every day is the highest ranking official in town unless otherwise relieved. Yet that person is in the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable locations in the police department and is essentially operating out of a closet when they should be able to have enough room to have a conference with his or her team. So that's also a very important project that has to get done. And that is something that we will get at least 20 years out of.
Okay, yeah, and I guess, and just to clarify, I wasn't really questioning whether the bathrooms would last for 20 years, but you know, are these phases that you've got listed here, does this, in your mind, does this take care of the building for the foreseeable future, or do you anticipate another follow-on project with more phases? And I guess part of the reason I ask is, you know, when we think about patching up these buildings and we think about sometimes what that involves, you know, we'd hate to, you know, spend money and do something that then might have to be undone if we were going to, you know, if we found that we needed something else. So I was just more thinking of the overall scope of the 3 phases, I guess. And maybe you can't answer that, but maybe that's something that we find out as we look at, you know, the design of this building.
Yeah, and that's a very fair point. And we hope we don't find any bigger problems as we start opening walls and floors. But that potential is always there. But as far as other projects that kind of help to keep our building up to date, I mean, we do have a budget line for maintenance and repair of the building. So we do dip into that every year for smaller projects, but these are the bigger projects that our budget lines couldn't support and we felt really needed to be done.
Okay, thank you for that. And so, and the design work, so phase 1, the money was approved through ARPA, but that, where does that design process sit? We've hired the architect, but we're waiting on.
The architect has been hired. We released funds for phase 1 of every project. The next move that I believe is happening very shortly is releasing funds for phase 2 of each project. And that gets us the full complete construction documents. Once that's done, we can move into phase 3, which is when we start putting the work out to bid.
Okay, and you said, so when you talked about the 3 phases, those are the phases of the first project.
Phases of each project.
Gotcha. Okay, so maybe let me clarify my question. When do we expect to get back the architect's design documents and know what the broader project looks like?
So we were actually on the phone with them today and they are admitting that they owe us documentation. So we have been putting pressure on them this week. So hopefully we'll have more information by next week.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the board? Mr. Walsh, is that Ms. Leclerc? Sorry.
No, it's Amy.
Like ghost hand.
Everybody's hands. I'm just saying.
So the 350,000 ARPA, so plus this 500 would cover those phases to get you through the bid? And then it's an estimate of what you think the cost is going to be associated with the construction of this?
So we're looking at it as most likely the 350,000 initial ARPA funds will cover the architect's fees that will get us all of these schematics, construction plans, and the bidding process for the contractors that they start bringing in, and then a portion of the construction administration and oversight with funds available to begin first project.
And this 500 though is then for what?
That is for next year's project, which is the female and male locker rooms and the detention area.
But just so I'm clear about this, maybe I'm wrong. You're gonna get, based on the architect's design, you're gonna get a solid price on phase 2, the locker rooms too, right? So my thought process here is that we're not gonna vote on this item tonight. We're gonna vote on, the backup material says they're asking for $500,000, $500,000 for year 2 rehabilitation. We don't know really how much year 2 is gonna cost because the architect's still designing it, okay? So what I think we should do as a board is, I think what we would have to do is cut $500,000 from the resolution with an understanding that we're gonna get solid numbers on all 3 phases. And, 2 or 3 months from now, when you're gonna come back and understand where all this fits in, and then we'll be able to vote on it. Is that fair to say?
That's fair.
Does that cause any delays? I mean, you obviously put this on here for a reason and wanted to present this tonight. I want to just make sure we're not shorting you in any way, because these are critical projects, it sounds like, and things you want to get done.
Yeah, and when we started, we were under the impression that we had to have some kind of numbers to put forward to start this process. And like I said, we used less formal methodologies to try to come up with some estimates. It's the point you are making is very fair. We have moved into this phase where we have the architects working on our behalf to get us closer estimates than what we consider to be rough or conservative. So if we were to come back in a couple of months after the architects have done their due diligence and we have more solid numbers for you, I think we are very agreeable to that.
So you're comfortable, there's no concerns there? Okay.
We're comfortable with that.
So just thinking about the calendar, obviously March, we have our budget season. And then it's got to fit between our budget process and our summer break, right? So it would be frame or April.
Yeah, no, I think that's doable. One of the things that I'll just point out, and to get to Mr. Matola's point here, we had this long conversation when we did the HVAC project, the school HVAC project a couple of months ago. And we talked about, approving things based on, conceptual designs or a swag, and then the numbers come back and they're very different. And obviously this is not anywhere near the magnitude of the HVAC project, but it is a multi-phase project that has a lot of unknowns. And so, I kind of like the idea of getting the design work done. When we have that, we're ready to go out to bid. We can approve the full cost at that time, understand how the cash flow rolls out, and and approve a project that has some certainty in the costs, and be comfortable that we've got the whole thing covered. I don't want to speak for anyone else. I'm certainly convinced of the necessity of doing all these things. It's just a matter of how we, the basis on which we approve these estimates. And so I'm supportive of Mr. Matola's thought that we bring this back before the board when we can approve a cost estimate for the full project in all its phases.
I mean, chances are, if we voted on it tonight, you would be back before us in a few months anyway with solid numbers, and you might need more money then. Let's just do it once when we know.
I would just note, if it's south of $1 million, we don't bring back. That's why this is under the sort of the non-recurring, where we group projects together. So you would typically take projects separate like that if they were 1 million or above. So it would either come back if there were other items to do a package. You technically could, but from a cost and time perspective, they don't normally do, and the town doesn't normally do under 1 million separately. So that's why it's part of this package now.
Yeah. And I mean, that makes sense. The only reason, and David, thank you for that. I was just, if we look at the three phases of this, the three phases exceed $1 million. We've split this up, and I know we've already got the ARPA money in there, and that's fine. I'm not saying we're doing anything inappropriate. Although this $500,000 doesn't really have a lot behind it, so that number could be very different once we do get the design. So I'm not interested in causing more work, but I think, again, if we have a multi-phase project and we don't really know, what we're looking at in terms of the costs, I just feel like oftentimes we spend an awful lot of time coming back and asking for a lot of explanations on why numbers changed. And part of the reason that happens is because we really didn't have solid estimates up front when we approved things. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no disagreement on the philosophy. It makes perfect sense. I just want to make sure, that point was aware.
Yeah. No, this is definitely aligned with our normal process, but okay. Other comments, Jim?
Yeah. If we're really going to go down this road, I think that once we have the numbers, we should just do one bond resolution for the entire thing. Be done with this.
Exactly. Yep.
Come one time and not have to wait for phase 3 to come along. And just do it as one bond. And that being said, Caitlin, I know you go to the bond markets around July 1st or so, when would you need this to be approved?
End of May. So
End
the
of May.
RTM, the last meeting in May.
Yep.
Would make that issuance. Everything in June is too late.
Okay, so we got to put this on our June calendar,
Or no,
May calendar, our May calendar for the first of.
Yeah, well, I mean, based on what the deputy chief just told us, assuming that the architect comes back and we have a design and we have a cost estimate shortly, we can put it on the agenda as soon as it's ready. And we are going to, I assume, have other bonding resolutions over $1 million before us, before year end, because, we've got a bunch of them sitting on the capital plan. So this won't be the only one. Okay, John, Mr. Mottola, do you want to formalize your suggestion with an amendment here, or?
So I guess what I would do is, because this is the last item presented, right? And for this,
For this item, yes.
so I'd make a motion to reduce the resolution by $500,000.
Okay, I will second that. Any discussion on that, further discussion on that motion? Mr. Walsh?
I'm just saying that I'm willing to sign on to this, but I am in full support of this project, and I'm in full support of going for a bond by May or before for the entire amount.
yeah,
I think everyone is, yeah.
agree. Yeah, I think that's a general sentiment.
When we go back to work
Madam-
tomorrow and see the chief.
Yeah, one thing I would say, Jim, is, I think we would probably approve, if we approve a separate resolution for all three phases or for the whole thing, we would approve that resolution. We would only bond for, we might bond that over time, over 2 or 3 years based on when the construction's going to happen, similar to how we do with other projects. But agreed, like for whatever we need to bond this upcoming year, we would need to have that approved in the appropriate time frame. Mr. Staffstrom, did you have a comment?
Yes, I think the amendment actually should reduce the amount to $3,260,200 and also delete item 8 off the exhibit so it's clear where the reduction came.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, John, do you want to amend your motion there then?
Yeah, what was the figure again, John? Sorry.
$3,260,200.
So I make a motion to amend the resolution, the $3,260,200.
Yep.
Yeah.
And delete.
And delete item number 8, which is Exhibit A.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will again second that motion. Any other discussion from the board?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just one last comment. I'm not sure it was clear, but I think for the avoidance of doubt, I think what we're asking you to be prepared to do, and you'll need to push your architects to come back to us in April or May, whenever the information's available for the full project. And that may be more than what they're currently working on, but that way we can do it all as Mr. Welsh said.
Understood.
Okay,
And I appreciate it.
that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So why don't we vote on the amendment proposed by Mr. Mottola? All in favor of that amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, it looks unanimous, 8-0. Okay.
7-0, Mr. Stark left the room. Or
Mr.
7-0.
Stark left the room. Okay, 7-0. All right, thank you. Okay, so now we'll move to vote. All in favor of approving the amended resolution, please raise your hand.
And Mr. Stark's back in the room, so it is 8-0.
Okay, all right, so 8-0. All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks to the Deputy Chief. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for everything. Okay, we are going to move to item 8, which is to hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution amending and restating a resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $3,717,899 for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, to expand the scope of the Jackie Durrell Pavilion upgrades project description." This again was this relates to a 20-year non-recurring capital bond. This item also requires RTM approval. The resolution begins on page 188 of the posted backup. The additional backup materials begin on page 192. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Curley. Thank you. Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. Let's see, Mr. Calabrese, I assume I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. Hope for the last time tonight.
Yes.
Anthony Calabrese, Director of Parks and Recreation. Coming before you tonight with really a procedural move that we were trying to do. When I came before you last year at this time for the Jackie Durrell Pavilion upgrades, I was very specific with what we wanted to do, and the upgrades were specific to the bathrooms and the kitchen. We did that work, and we did it all in-house using our public works guys, and we came in under budget, significantly under budget, and we were very happy with the quality of the work. After they were done, you know, the next thing that we looked at was the deck. So I asked them to quote it out for me. Going off the state bid list, which is what's in your backup right now, we have a quote for $84,000 to replace the current deck as is, same configuration as what they're now. But this material that we'd be using would match the new Penfield Pavilion deck. So they'd be using the Kebony lumber, which is completely maintenance-free. The decks that we currently have, the deck we have at Jackie Durrell gets painted twice a year. If you look at it, it's probably got 100 layers of paint on it. Rotting wood, it does need to be replaced. So we thought that taking this additional $54,000 that was remaining in the project and applying it towards this part of the project would be a good use of that funds, and then DPW and Parks and Recreation would split the difference on the remaining $30,000 coming out of each of our operating budgets. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions from the board? Is that Mr. Curley?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for that summary, Mr. Calabrese. Just want to make sure I understand and am clear. The procedural part that you talked about is you're not asking us to change the dollar amount of the bond resolution. You're just asking the description to be more expansive, not limited to kitchen and bathroom, so that you can spend money on the.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm clear on that point. And then it strikes me that I don't mean to be the fly in the ointment, but we're about to rip out all the decking around Penfield. Can any of that material be repurposed since you talked about it being the same material as that decking?
The new material that's going in at Penfield will be the same material. So the current material is just regular pressure treated wood.
No, I'm sorry. I thought is the Penfield decking that's about to be ripped out the same material that's going to go down at Jackie Durrell?
No, no.
Okay, that's fine. I'm good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. Are there other questions on this item? Okay, I see none. So we can vote on this. All in favor of approving the resolution referenced in item 8 and set forth in the posted meeting materials, please raise your hand. It looks to be unanimous 8-0. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for saving $54,000. Glad we can put it to good use on the decking.
Reallocating.
Yes, reallocate it. All right. So we're going to move to item 9. This is to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $500,000 to the legal department to cover unanticipated costs of the UI case, plus the additional costs for legal expenses, expert fees, and lobbyist fees from contribution to surplus per the backup. So the materials related to this item begin on page 194 of the posted backup. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Mottola, seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. Thank you. I see no public comment on the WebEx. Any public comment? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Piers, are you going to take us through this item?
Yes. So essentially, the legal budget is tracking to what was budgeted, which was the $565,000 number, with the exception of the UI case. That's caused a major hole in the budget because this was not anticipated at the time that the budget was prepared. I've listed the expenses that were as of February 14th. I believe that number is still the current number. There are some additional known expenses. There's my firm's invoice for January. There's a payment for Bertram Moses. This is a little unusual, but we had a discussion about this at the Board of Selectmen. Essentially, at the time that the town got engaged, the town was a little bit behind in getting up to speed on finding experts, and Bertram Moses went out and found the town's experts and worked on documents that the town benefited from in the case. So my firm did an analysis of looked at Bertram Moses's bills. There was a request from the neighborhood group to have half of the bills, which was a higher number than this, paid. And based on the work that was done and the benefit that the town received from the work that they did for the town, the 37,711 number is what the Board of Selectmen unanimously approved on January 3rd. The current status of the case, most of the board is probably aware from the news, but the Citing Council has ruled. We now are in an appeal period. I fully anticipate we're going to take an appeal to Superior Court. That appeal is a record appeal. There is the potential for a motion to stay at some point during the case, but essentially at this point, the case will be briefing at the Superior Court, while at the same time the town will, endeavor to engage in discussions to try to work something out with UI, which will involve the use of our experts, our engineers, and the town, for a short time, had a lobbyist engaged. They backed out after receiving pressure from the utilities. So the town is now in the process of engaging another lobbyist. So the total request is for $500,000, which takes us through the end of the current fiscal year.
Okay, thank you for that summary. questions from the board? Please speak up if you can.
This is Jim Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Go ahead.
What is the lobbyist doing? Lobbying the siting council on our behalf? Who's the lobbyist lobbying?
The lobbyist would, well, there's not currently a lobbyist, but the lobbyist, because the one that was engaged backed out, but the lobbyist will be lobbying the General Assembly and putting legislative pressure on the utilities. The utilities do not want to see heavy-handed legislation coming down that shines a light on the process and restricts what they can do, and that threat of legislation gives the town leverage. So it's lobbying the General Assembly and the governor's office to support legislation.
Have we used any lobbyists so far, or no lobbyist dollars have been spent yet?
I don't believe any lobbyist dollars have been spent because the lobbyist was engaged for such a short time period. But the town is now in the process of getting a new lobbyist engaged. The lobbyist firm, the contract went to the Board of Selectmen. I can tell you the lobbyist firm. It was Gaffney, Bennett and Associates was the lobbyist firm.
Okay. And I see the total upcoming charges of about $80,000. And what's the remaining amount going to be used for? So let me be more clear. The total payment of 214 was 214,885. We're about to write a check to your firm and to Bircham Moses that'll total about $80,000. Then that's that's 294,000. So now you're asking for about another $206,000 of legal fees.
Legal fees, expert fees, and lobbyist fees through the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. And what are those going to be?
The experts are not cheap. I mean, there's, the bills to date, that's 100,000 out of the 214 that's been paid.
Okay.
The lobbyist fee under the contract with Gaffney Bennett that was approved was $5,000 a month. So, I mean, at the time, we'd anticipated, something along those lines for each month. So if you assume that we engage somebody, you're looking at $5,000 a month for that through the end of the fiscal year. One of the larger unknowns about the litigation is the timing of the case and when we will get into briefing and whether there will need to be a motion to stay. A motion to stay would stay the development of the project. It seems unlikely that that's going to be needed at this point, but if it is needed, because there's no automatic stay when this approval is on appeal, it would probably require an evidentiary hearing with expert witnesses and other things, which would be time consuming.
Okay.
The experts are also involved in reviewing the engineered designs. So as UI develops the design for the double circuit route on the north side of the tracks, our engineers need to be involved to advise the town on the design and things that we need to advocate for on the town's behalf.
So if you don't spend the approximate $206,000 between now and June 30th, we expect to get some of this back. There should be money left in your account, correct?
Yes.
There's no intention to spend that anyplace else, correct?
There is not.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not, to put it differently, I'm not expecting the normal legal budget, the non-UI part it's going to land pretty close, I think, unless something really unforeseen additional happens. it'll land pretty close to that 565 number. That was budgeted.
All right. Would you be able to come back at our next quarterly meeting and update us on where we are and how much of this extra $206,000 you've spent?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Other questions from the board on this item? Okay. Seeing none. All in favor, we can vote. All in favor of approving the transfer of funds set forth in item 9 of the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous. Is it unanimous?
No. I want to abstain.
Okay. So 7 in favor, opposed, abstentions.
One abstention.
One abstention. Okay, so the item passes 7-0-1. Thank you, everyone.
We should say it.
Oh,
Yeah, I got it.
You got it.
You got it. Yeah.
Yep, we got you. Thank you, Mary. Okay.
Lori, the only reason I'm abstaining is my husband works for Bertram Moses and I don't know anything about it, so just figured it was the best thing to do.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you for letting us know. All right. So, and thank you, Mr. Pierce, for, on behalf of the town, for all the work that's being done by your firm in particular. I think even if, obviously, we still have a long road ahead of us with this, but it sounds like we avoided some of the worst that could have happened if the siting council hadn't been swayed recently. All right, so we will move forward to item 10. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the chief fiscal officer to transfer amounts among departments per the backup. So the materials for this item are included in the posted meeting backup beginning on page 196. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Penley, seconded by Mr. Stark. Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? I see no one in the chat room. Okay. And who is going to, Mr. Becker, are you going to take us through this item, or Mr. Gerber?
I'll start.
Okay.
And
Okay, so Mr. Gerber, if I could ask you a favor, and because we didn't, because of the way the agenda item is worded, if you wouldn't mind, before getting into the details of the schedule and the backup, and I'm referencing specifically page 196 on the backup entitled Budget Transfers Fiscal 24, can you just start with the bottom line here and point us to the actual transfer amounts being requested and clarify the departments that they're coming from and going to before we kind of get into the detail of the numbers?
yes. So on the right side of this sheet, budget transfers 24, sort of in the middle, there's a box on the right. The top line is admin shortfall. Everyone see that?
Yep.
So we're looking for transfers that net to 65,428. And the way this works out is there's a transfer needed to admin services in the amount of 63,501. There's excess in the first selectman's office that we would want to transfer to admin services of 11,171. And there's a shortfall in finance, which would need a transfer in the amount of 13,098 from surplus. So 11,171 from first selectman to admin, 63,501 from surplus to admin, and 13,098 from surplus to finance.
Okay, thank you for that. And also to clarify, so similar to the last transfer that we did, this transfer of the net of 65,000 would be coming from the budgeted surplus number. Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that. And I'll turn it back to you to take us through the backup for this.
Yeah, so I think the first number you would want to look at is bottom row. There's a little box that includes severance, vacation payout, and FICA related to those. That totals $133,900. So the reason for the shortfall would be because of payments made for employees who have left. And that can be broken down if you look at the top box, the first selectman's office. There was total severance of $45,518, unused vacation of $44,264. We can net out accrual for the unused vacation of $43,944 and for the FICA of $3,362. And that's really how you can see up there also sort of the budget versus the actuals, but that's mostly what gets you to the excess, because the chief administrative officer position has not been filled. That's not projected to be part of our administration going forward. Any questions on that top box?
Yeah, Mr. Walsh?
No, it's
Amy.
Amy.
Oh. Amy, all right. Amy, go ahead, Ms. Ruggiero, sorry.
Just so I'm clear here with the numbers, it looks like because you had it accrued, it's not driven by the unused vacations, it's driven by the severance, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruggiero. Mr. Mottola?
So, when I first saw this, I was curious about the severance, and I guess later, was this today or late yesterday, we got an additional backup. There's a 2021 Town of Fairfield benefits summary for non-union department heads and public elected officials. That I looked at for tonight's meeting, and it talked about, severance and unused vacation and then payout for those. I guess my first question is, and I don't know if anyone knows this, maybe first selected me now. Do we know whether or not this, as it's a policy, was approved by the Board of Selectmen at some point? Mr. Gerber, any idea?
We still, some of this is a bit of a mystery. I was trying to find that information, and we're digging into it. We did find the policy, the 2021 policy that indicates that the first select person, as an elected official, could get severance. I just really found out about that a few weeks ago.
And this, it looks like the first select person is getting a severance of $11,440. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And the policy does say, the first paragraph, it talks about who's eligible. It talks about non-union department heads and public elected officials employed on a regular full-time basis by the town of Fairfield. So I guess my question is, and maybe it's the municipal attorney coming out in me, is to me, I believe this type of a policy would need it to be approved by the Board of Selectmen to be a valid policy. And I don't know if it ever was, so I think we need to try to find out whether that in fact happened. And then the other question I have too is, are elected officials, once they leave office, entitled to a severance pay? I don't know, there's some language in the state constitution that may preclude that. So I'd like some clarity on that. So I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add, or.
I would just say, I would ask Attorney Pierce or someone from Cornwall, together with Kathleen Simpson, should look into that.
And then the other thing I would just make sure that our Kathleen, our Human Resources Department, is make sure that the unused vacation time that was paid out is appropriate. And I'm not saying it's not appropriate, but because if you look at this policy, for example, it talks about who is eligible for unused vacation time and how that's accrued, and it certainly may be perfectly appropriate, but I would hope that it was all double checked before these were paid out. So I would ask that it just be double checked again. So, I mean, those are my questions. First of all, whether or not an elected public official is entitled to severance once that person leaves office, can get it legally. And also to make sure that the numbers here, payouts jive with our records of when vacations were taken and how much vacation time was carried over, those types of things. So that's what I would like.
May I respond to that really quickly? We don't have, one of our goals will be to implement like a time and expense sort of and vacation tracking program, but we just don't have a good one in place right now. So that may take a little bit of work, but
I'm assuming that when CAO or the chief of staff, or the first select person took a vacation when they were working for the town of Fairfield, that's been documented somewhere. It should have been documented through Human Resources. So hopefully we have those records.
Okay.
So
Thank
those
you.
are my issues.
Madam Chair?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Mr. Curley?
Yeah, thank you. I was a little bit surprised at this schedule, and thank you for pulling it together. But I was a little surprised to see that there was severance. I guess the vacation didn't surprise me, but the severance did. And I actually contacted a gentleman at CCM, Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, just to ask if it was customary for elected officials to have severance. And the response was that it's not customary. He was not aware of any town or municipality in the state of Connecticut where that town or municipality had a policy to pay severance to elected officials or even senior officers who serve at the pleasure of that select person or mayor. So that kind of, I was actually pleased to see the policy that kind of solidified that that's what the town does. Even it may be an outlier, but at least we have a policy to that regard. But I guess my question is a follow-up to John's or Mr. Mottola's, that if this policy was signed by the former first select woman in 2021, I don't know what changed from the previous policy, whether this severance was a longstanding element of the policy or if this was something new. But regardless, I think it's really important, considering that it does talk about compensation for the former first select woman, that we make sure that it has in fact been approved by the Board of Selectmen. So I guess my question, legal question to the Mr. Pierce is whether this policy is official and in effect if it hasn't been approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, can I, so thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Gerber, listen, I'll just be straight here. I was more than a little surprised for this. I've never heard of an elected official getting severance if they lose an election, one. So maybe, so I'm not surprised to hear the CCM thing. But, you know, this policy, I'd like to know, I think we need a legal review, and I'd like to know a few things. Number one, is there any precedent for having done this before? Did Mike Tetro get severance? did his chief of staff get severance? What is the precedent? When was this policy put in place? And what was the authority to put this policy in place? Because this effectively is a compensation arrangement. I mean, severance is part of compensation. Accrued vacation payouts are part of compensation. As far as I know, the authority to spend money depends on a couple things. One, it has to be a budgeted appropriation. Two, if it's a contract, a contractual agreement with employees, I mean, typically that's either something that has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen or the RTM or both. So I don't know where this policy came from, but I find it hard to believe that any chief executive, including you, Mr. Gerber, could simply write a policy like this and have it approved. So I think, in my mind, I'd like to know, was there appropriate authority to write this policy? Is it a longstanding policy? When was it ever approved? Is there precedent for paying elected officials and political appointees severance? If so, we should know that. And again, what is the legal authority? And in reading the policy, it talks about involuntary terminations, which I think is really a tricky one if you're talking about an elected official. So I will just state right out that I would like, and I see Mr. Pierce here, and I'm not going to put him on the spot if he doesn't want to be on the spot, but, I think that we should have a legal review of this before we move forward on this item. That's my opinion. And I don't know, Bill, if Mr. Gerber, if you want to answer any of those questions, but those are my concerns.
Does that cause problems? Well, I can say, we have to do a lot of digging, I think, and get back to you. But with Phil Pierce, or someone in his firm, we can certainly, we'll get working on it.
Okay. And if I could just say one other thing, I mean, and I think that our town has a good process for the compensation of the first select person, which is not dissimilar to what's done in the private sector. And that is that we have that compensation reviewed periodically, and it's approved, sort of independently. So in our case, it's approved by the Board of Selectmen based on the recommendation of a committee. So in the spirit of that, which kind of matches what our charter requires, again, it certainly seems to me like the Board of Selectmen would be required to approve compensation arrangements that impact the first select person. I don't know about the select people, but that's covered by the budget appropriation process. But certainly for the first select person. So, unless there's longstanding precedent for doing this, and we have some evidence of that, I would just, I would like to understand whether there was, and I guess a few other questions, was this policy, were these severance arrangements outlined in offer letters for people that were hired? Are these public? Are they posted? Were there promises made? Those are the questions that I have, and I'm asking them because I find them to be very unusual.
So I believe.
I just.
Go ahead. And Mr.
Sorry.
Becker, do you want to respond? Or I know Mr. Curley has a question, but if you want to respond, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I do have something, but also.
I just have information that may be helpful to this discussion because, in doing the budget, I have some of these documents, and for the earliest policy I have for this is for 2016. Doesn't look like the one from 2021. But it was 2016 benefit summary for non-union department heads and public officials. And there is a section at the bottom that has, there is a separation benefits section. So just for the researching factor, you may have to go back further.
Is there anything in that document that talks about the elected officials?
Or severance?
Or severance?
Yeah, so from page 16, it has separation benefits. and in the event of permanent involuntary, it doesn't, you know.
At the top though, is it talking about elected officials or is it just
Yeah,
talking
so,
about?
well, the document is titled, benefit summary for non-union department heads and public officials.
So it's the same thing.
Officials.
So we did look at it and there was a question on Mr. Tetro. He received a vacation payout, but not a severance that we can find.
Who's that signed by? The 2016 one? Who signs that document?
I don't have any signature. There's no signature here.
That could be a draft, right?
Could be a draft.
You don't have if you don't have a signed version, I would hope somebody would sign it. Or the board of selectmen voted on it.
Well,
If you
this
don't have
isn't
something-
like, this is just a copy, could be part of a working copy that one of the people have downstairs, so there was discussion about it, so I figured I'd share it.
Is there a line for a signature?
Or what?
Not that I see,
Line, the signature line.
not that I see here. No.
So
You just may have a draft.
So we are reviewing a couple of different things. HR is actually taking the lead on some of it, but looking through personnel files and some history on some exits. Also trying to go through some board minutes. I had recalled that this had come up at one point. They used to track PETA. That came up as an issue. If you recall, even the committee now that sets the first select person and select person salary didn't even used to exist at one point in time, and then it was brought up as an issue, including the tracking of PETA and how that affected the elected official and the department heads. So you're gonna have to date back about 7 or 8 years or so to find this. So we're trying to go through some meeting minutes and see when it was discussed and then try to find those documents or any of the discussion there. So it's gonna take a little bit of time to kind of dig through like that document as an example and see if that was even up to a board or whatnot. You know, so.
Thank you. Mr. Sorry, are you done, Mr. Becker?
Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Ruggiero.
I think it would make sense to regroup on this issue once we have the facts, because I don't think it's fair to anybody to make assumptions here or throw out some kind of gray shaded thing where it seems like somebody did something that's not correct. So if we could just take this back, do the research, find out if this has been paid, because based on what he shared, I don't know if it's a draft or not, but I would like to know the facts. I don't want to get into, it sounds like the budget has a shortfall no matter what, so I assume this has been paid. And that's already done, so whether or not there's a legal thing, we'll look into that. But you still need the transfer, and you're looking for this transfer, I imagine, today. And you need to walk away getting our approval.
Yeah.
So that would be my
Either way, the money's come out of it for now, the money.
Yeah, like you're gonna have a shortfall.
It's out of the accounts, we've netted it.
So if we could just
Yes.
get the facts and come back and regroup, I'd rather do that and focus on the task at hand with, you need a transfer, we're short no matter what. Seems like there's gonna be some spend here. Let's focus on that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Ruggiero. I think if we're going to ask for a legal review, which I heard, I personally am not prepared to vote on this item because if anything, and again, I'm not drawing any conclusions, but if there was not proper authority for these payments, then payments can be clawed back. So I would prefer, like you, to get all of the answers. Mr. Curley.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with Ms. Ruggiero that I think it's really important that we gather the facts. I don't think we need to make decisions tonight on these dollar amounts. But I do think the facts matter and the history matters, precedent matters. Let's make sure we're comparing to the right policies, whether it's 2016 or if there's something in the interim. I'll reiterate my request or desire to understand what changed. What was the change that was made in 2021? But separately from that, I think there's several legal questions that need to be researched and addressed. But another one that kind of struck me, and we haven't touched on it yet, but we're talking about severance for the former first select woman who is still a select woman. She's still on the town payroll. I don't know if that technically means she's severed or not. I think that's a legal question. But if that, regardless of whether the policy should or should not include elected officials, or not, I think there's a separate legal question that needs to be addressed as to whether she's actually been severed. And then the second point that I want to make, and I think this is something for a later date, but I'd like to ask the current administration, given that this policy is an outlier to what we understand the rest of the state of Connecticut does, if the administration would be willing to consider amending, regardless of the outcome of this topic, amending this policy so that it brings us back into the norm with the state and doesn't provide severance to elected officials.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, yeah, point taken, Mr. Curley. I clearly, I think it needs to be revisited and, frankly, as I said, I think, what the policy was, when it was put in place, what pieces of paper we found, whether they're signed or not signed, that's all interesting. But I think, was anything ever implemented? I do not remember, and I could be wrong, but I do not remember approving a transfer to cover the last first select, severance for Mr. Tetro. So maybe I'm just not remembering, but if this is and I guess Mr. Becker said it hasn't been done. So this is a change in practice, regardless of whether there was a policy on a piece of paper somewhere, that portion at least seems to be a change in practice. So it effectively seems to be a new policy. And, I think we're all trying to understand the authority under which something like this is done because, again, we have a legal way to authorize the spending of dollars, and that's either through budget appropriations or through contracts, which have very specific approval requirements in our charter. So I'm sorry, somebody else had their hand up. Mr. Walsh.
Just to address something John started with, in regards to the vacation pay, that's all for the last 25 years. That has been something that has been done. I agree. In fact, I don't think Mr. Plato ever took a day off or vacation. I honestly believe that. I used to kid with him about it because I think he wanted, if he ever got let go, to have as much money at the end so he could find another job. Because it's a hard thing to do. All of a sudden, the electorate going the other direction with you. So, so the severance thing's kind of new to me. So this is the first time I'm hearing about it. I didn't even have a chance to read this agreement fully before I came here today. I'm not sure why it wasn't supplied earlier than this afternoon at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, when we kind of knew this severance issue, obviously pursuant to this budget transfers fiscal year 24 was going to be becoming an issue. But yes, I think,
I can answer that, Jim, and my apologies, but this backup came out on Friday. And so by the time everyone got through it and, there was severance outlined in here, I asked today that the severance policy be distributed to the board. So that's why it wasn't available in the original package. So.
okay. But obviously there's some things to explore. I don't know whether losing an election is involuntary employment. Mr. Curley, you raised an issue about whether a severance has happened. The document, at least in the first paragraph, seems to suggest you have to be a full-time,
That may be
whatever. So I think that it's a different position to be a select person as opposed to a first select person. So I guess we'll be trying to get answers to all this stuff.
Disturbing.
Yeah.
What?
Yes. Yeah. Mr. Matola, sorry.
I'll defer to our town attorney. The issue I'm having is I believe that such a policy as this needed to be approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care if the law says, let's say we had a policy, we did this for 25, 30 years. If a policy was never approved by a Board of Selectmen, the policy is void. Just because you've been doing something for years and years and years that was illegal, and this is particularly in the municipal area, it wasn't done pursuant to your charge. Just because you've been doing it for years and years and years doesn't make it legal. So That's what we need to look into. Something like this, in my opinion, again, defer to the town attorney, it needed to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, and maybe it was at some point, but that's what we need to look at first, in my opinion, so. That's
Okay. Mr. Penley?
Yeah, I was I
Thank
was
you,
just responding with what Mr. Matola is saying. So are you separating out into the accrued vacation and the severance? Because I think, like Mr. Walsh was saying, like if you just read the severance part, that doesn't seem to actually entitle at least the prior first selectman to severance. Just on the face of it, it doesn't. So that wouldn't create any kind of compensation for it. It wouldn't need approval. But the other aspect,
I think we've been giving severance out for years. That you've said, so I don't know what's that pursuant to? Is it?
Accrued vacation, John, I think you meant accrued vacation. We've been giving.
Vacation, did they follow like the supervisor's contract? Is that what they did? But this doesn't seem to say that. This is a little different. I think it's different, so but I understand that some of our upper end executives over the years who have left have accrued vacation.
Yeah.
And those are non-union that maybe followed one of the union contracts or something like that. So all this we need to figure out, that's all.
I mean, I don't even understand, get away from political. I don't understand the policy in general in regards to department heads, to be quite honest with you. We're talking about involuntary termination. That means that we could have someone who's doing a horrible job. There's been people who have had prosecutions against them, and we have to pay them a severance? Doesn't seem to make sense.
reasons other than costs, dismissal for reasons other than costs.
I just have a question about it.
Yeah, but it says eligibility for severance compensation occurs in the case of dismissal for reasons other than cause. So if you have cause to fire someone, they're not going to be eligible for severance, right? It's only for, I'm firing you because I don't like you. I'm firing you because there's a new sheriff in town.
Yeah, it's just difficult. Having done some employment stuff, the whole cause thing becomes an entire trial, and it's just cheaper for the administration to pay that off as opposed to going to the Superior Court and running up a $500,000 fee.
Well, Jim, I would agree with that, which raises the question then, and maybe Mr. Becker or Mr. Gerber know. I mean, did we pay severance to any of the employees that departed at the beginning of the last administration? I mean, we had Mr. Mayor, we had Mr. Hibson, we had, all of those folks. I don't know if they were fired for cause or not, or because we never understood that, but
I don't know.
Okay, so
Yeah, we'll check on that.
We'll get their payments. We'll make a summary of, why don't we put something together with a summary starting with, Mr. Tetro and then several after there to get that answer for you.
And hopefully Mr. Pierce can come back to us. I mean, in my experience, and listen, unlike several of my colleagues here, I am not an attorney, but what I've seen repeatedly over the course of my professional career with my clients, et cetera, is, oftentimes severance policies don't exist, but when there's an established practice of paying severance, that can become a de facto policy. And if you have a riff or something and you all of a sudden deviate from that or try not to pay people, you can get yourself in trouble. So I think precedent is important. Again, I don't know the validity of this policy that we found somewhere, but it seems to me that it was never enforced, even if it was written somewhere. So I do think that those questions are important to answer. And I guess my other thing, again, I'm not trying to be a lawyer here, but I guess my question for Mr. Pierce too is that, clearly we have an established process where first select person compensation has to be reviewed every 4 years and sort of voted on, so to the extent, this is part of the compensation, and both severance and accrued vacation most certainly are, or those payouts are part of, someone's compensation package. I would not want, for example, I would not want Mr. Gerber to be able to wake up tomorrow morning and decide that he should give himself an extra month of vacation and get it paid out at the end of the year if he doesn't take it. I mean, that's not how this is supposed to work. Our chief executive is not supposed to make decisions that impact their own pocket. That's why we have the requirement for the Board of Selectmen to do it. So I don't care who it is. This is not a political thing. I think this policy has to be evaluated from a retrospective perspective. Was it legal? Was it in keeping, with our charter? Is what we did consistent with past practice? And then going forward, we really need to reevaluate this. In terms of the accrued vacation, what are, do we ever use it or lose it? Are we being more generous or less generous than what our union employees get with these types of unused vacation policies? So all of this stuff, I think, is a good thing to look at. But for this item, unless somebody else wants to do it, I would go ahead and make a motion to defer this item or however, whatever the right form is. I'm not prepared to vote on this. So that would be my suggestion.
As opposed to, Madam Chair?
Yes.
As opposed to tabling this to a date certain, I do think it makes sense to take the time to gather the facts. I recognize that we're about to enter our budget month of March, so likely makes sense to revisit back or when we come back in April. But I imagine that the dollar amounts could change too, right? So can we just not?
I think we're asking for a legal opinion. So I think that process can to the extent Mr. Piers can look at this and the town, he needs to gather information from HR or whatever. I think that can go ahead and happen. And then, when it's appropriate, this transfer request can come back before us, if that makes sense.
Fortunately, we don't have a lot of data points in a fortunate way, we don't have a lot of data points in terms of history, right? We know Plato to Tetro to, Brenda, and then now to Bill. So,
well, that's only one question of the many. So I hear you.
But I also don't think we need the dollar amounts. I think it's, did these people get paid accrued vacation? Yes or no? Right. And I think it's, did they get severance? Yes or no? I don't think the dollar amounts matter. So don't spend time on that.
Well, all right. And sorry, I don't mean to jump in. I guess what I would say on that is, again, and I'm not alleging anything in any way, but when you have a chief executive or a senior official, it is different than a regular employee who, when they take vacation, they're putting it in the timekeeping system and a supervisor signs off. You have senior officials that self-report vacation. So I think back to Mr. Matola's question, it is appropriate to make sure that gets captured. All of the appropriate vacation was captured in the system before accrued vacation gets paid out. Because, I know for me, I wasn't, I didn't get accrued vacation paid out. I'm not sure I was always perfectly diligent about recording vacation because, you take a half day here and you work 18 hours there and it's a mixture, right? But in the case where we are actually paying out accrued vacation, significant amounts that actually exceed severance here, to, former employees who self-report their time, I think that John's suggestion was appropriate, that we just make sure that the town has appropriate policies in place to make sure that we are capturing vacation that is taken. So.
Well, Madam Chair, with all due respect, I don't think we said things that were in contradiction. My point was to simplify the historical research. We don't necessarily know whether Mr. Flato got paid 4 days or 40 days, right? It's a binary yes or no. And then if the answer is yes, then there can be diligence done on the former First Select Woman's accrued vacation and whether that's the appropriate amount or not. But if
I completely agree.
It should be paid.
Yeah, agree. Do we have a practice of paying it? I think the answer is yes. The question is, were there changes made to the policy in regard to how much gets carried over, use it or lose it, or anything like that? I don't know any of those answers, but as we, if we're going to revisit this, I just want to make sure all our questions are out there so that we have everything that we need. Okay. Any other discussion on this?
Yes.
Amy, yeah.
I just want to point out the fact that there's an accrual here that almost matches exactly the amount that was paid out would tell you that if you're doing your accounting correctly, it's supposed to be estimated based on reality. So that would tell us that the amount paid was accurate, in fact. So I know that we're going on that. And with all due respect, given the time, if we're just saying the same things over and over, can we please just table this for tonight and move forward? Because at least 15 minutes ago, I asked if we could do that, and it's just repeating the same thing.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I do want to make sure everyone gets their questions out because we did
I
ask
think
for
it's
a
been
review
made.
of
The
this.
point's been made.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm not gonna, if we want to cut off conversation, then you can make a motion to do that and we can vote on it. Any other discussion on this, or does someone want to make a motion on this item?
Can I just ask a question? Bill, do you need to have this transfer? I mean, the money's been paid. Are you wanting to are you comfortable with us making a motion to defer this altogether, or aren't you in a shortfall no matter what?
Well, I would defer to the Board of Finance on this because having observed many Board of Finance meetings, I know sometimes you can wait till the end of the year sometimes and you're not supposed
As
to.
long as we're not leaving.
It's really up to.
I'm fine.
I don't
But
think
money
we have
has been
the
paid. I
money.
think we have a separate issue, and I agree with.
As
all
long
the
as you're.
issues that were made up
Yeah.
or brought up tonight, but I just, I'm fine with, I'll make a motion.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as we could wait as long as you're willing to let us wait, because we may go over at some point, as long as you're willing to.
Okay, at least we've raised the issue, and the other issues are going to be looked into, and we'll regroup on all the questions. I'm happy to make a motion to defer this to a date certain I guess whenever you feel you have the material.
Well, I guess we have to think procedurally. I don't want to for a date certain because we may not have the information by that date certain to vote on it. So
Robert rules, you got to say what that date is. You can't just say it's a date in the future. You got to say what the date is.
Can't we just not vote on it and then?
get off the agenda and then put it back on.
Yeah.
Let's just do that. We're not going to take
So we're
any
not
action
gonna
on this
Make
item.
a motion, we're not gonna take a second, we just take no action.
Understanding that.
Also, that you don't need to make a motion and take it off the agenda.
Right.
And fair.
We're going to take.
Motion on the floor, so you can.
There was no second.
Not to take any action on this.
Do we have, okay, so I'll rely on my colleagues here. So no, we don't have to take, so we do nothing, we simply do not vote. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Would never second it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and Mr. Piers, I guess you heard everything, so we'll, we are formally requesting that we have a legal review of this item as part of the information that we get back before this board votes on it again. Is that okay with you?
Understood. Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, so let us move on to item 11. To hear, consider, and act upon changes to the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Program as recommended by the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Subcommittee. The full text of the changes proposed by this agenda item are included in the posted meeting materials beginning on page 205. If approved by this board, these changes will require RTM approval and incorporation into the town ordinance on senior and disabled tax relief. So can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Mottola, seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. Okay. So let's see. All right, so is there any public comment on this item? I see no one in the chat room. Okay. Our colleague, Mr. Curley, who chairs the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Subcommittee, will be leading us through this item. Is Mr. Murray also here?
Yes,
he is.
right.
Okay.
Yes.
There he is. Okay.
He's been here all night.
Yes. We
So-
also have our tax assessor, Ross Murray, here available for questions. So thank you, Mr. Curley. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And in your backup, there's a 3-page report that the subcommittee prepared. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes. I recognize it's getting late in the night. I'm going to try and do this really quickly. But our town tax assessor came to us and asked that we consider 5 changes to the current ordinance, to the current senior and disabled tax relief program. None of the 5 are expected to have any or no material or no effect at all in terms of the program, but they're really meant to either clean up some typos in the legislation, set specific dates, help with the administration of the program, and or align the program, the town program with the state program. I've outlined the 5 requested changes. I could quickly run through them if you'd like, but I also want to make sure that people have a chance to ask our town tax assessor questions because he was the source of these requests. So I'll defer to the group as to whether people want me to take you through each of the 5, if we want to just ask the town assessor to do that.
It's up to you. Up to you, Craig, whatever you think.
Want me to do it? Okay, so the first suggested change is just to correct a typo in section 9515B 3, and it's to remove the word prior from the language, and it's on the next prior day. So it would correct it. It would read the next day, and then it also makes reference to the 10-year treasury note shall be the price for the opening price for the given day. So it's setting a specific time as opposed to a rate that would otherwise potentially change throughout the day. I don't see that one as being controversial. And I should note that we on the Board of Finance we can't write legislation. So we're just going to make a recommendation to the RTM who will actually make the actual changes to the ordinance. So if they change this slightly, it's really the spirit of what we're trying to do here and communicate to the RTM that we're okay with this. But they'll be the ones to make the actual change. The second change is to change the word application to applicant, which is the intent of the language, and also makes a change to specify the end of the preceding calendar year. So sets a specific date for the valuation of the QTAV, qualifying total asset value of the applicant. It gets really tough for the tax department to determine when if that 650 number is as of the date of the application. They really can't check that against anything, but setting it to the end of year number, it would align with an applicant's year-end statement from their financial institution. So that's more of
with the income.
And
your income is also determined from your prior year, from the prior year.
Yeah. The third one is just to remove the requirement for the tax department to provide a copy of the application submission to the applicant. And the point there is that the amount of the tax savings is already included on the tax statement. So it's a duplicative process and redundant and not necessary.
We also don't know the amount of the benefit until the mill rate is set, because part of the component is a percentage of the tax. So we don't know that until the mill rate's set.
Yeah. So those
are taking applications February 1st.
Those first 3 changes are fairly administrative in nature. The next one could potentially have a change to the program, but likely small. That the town program has benefits for a surviving spouse that start at the age of 60. The state program has those same benefits for surviving spouses that starts at the age of 50. The request is to change the eligibility for, in the town program from 60 years old to 50 years old, so it's in line with the state program. There's currently nobody in the program now that fits within that 10-year window, so it's not expected that it would change any of the numbers, but it could. So that's something that we could potentially discuss. And then the last one is the definition of income. Qualifying income is defined in section 95-8, section C5. And it currently reads adjusted gross income as defined in the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 as may be amended from time to time. That's inconsistent with the state program and it's synonymous with, but to avoid confusion, the request is to strike that and add the term all taxable and non-taxable income, which is consistent with the state program. So
It's the current practice anyway.
and then that is consistent with how the town runs it. So when we discussed this in the committee, the Board of Finance Senior Disabled Tax Relief Committee, we didn't see these as being controversial, but we recognize that there may be questions. That's why I asked Mr. Murray to be here tonight. But if we are comfortable moving forward with this, we can approve it. It would move over to the RTM and they could take steps to actually put these changes through. So I'll open it up to questions and Mr. Murray can address.
Thank you. Can I make a suggestion? Maybe what we can do is take questions on each suggested change at a time so that we're not jumping around in case there are any.
Sure.
And does anyone have any comments or concerns about suggested change number 1, which is deleting the word prior? Okay. Suggested name change number 2, changing application to applicant and specifying the end of the preceding calendar year for the QTAV rather than the date of the application. Questions on that? Mr. Gerber.
Yeah, Ross, I can't remember, when do you open up the application?
February 1st.
Okay, so it would be 12/31.
12/31 before that.
Yeah, preceding
Yeah,
calendar.
preceding, yes. Preceding.
Are there any other questions on this?
No.
On this change? Okay. All right. So suggested change number 3. Any questions on this striking of the word about delivering a copy to the applicant? Okay. Suggested change number 4, which is changing the qualifying age of the surviving spouse from 60 to 50. Any questions on that?
I did. So
Mr. Walsh, yeah.
so currently in this last year, we had no one involved with it. Correct. Correct. You looked historically, like the last 3, 4, 5 years that this issue come up.
I did not do a historical search, but I think I can recall maybe about 2 years ago, we had one person that fell in that category.
Okay.
So it's never been a large number.
What would? That's it. That's all I have. Thanks.
I think Jim was just going to ask the question.
Yeah.
But, so in this situation, an older spouse dies, the younger spouse can continue on senior tax relief, the same program that they had previously qualified for?
Yes. It just removes the age requirement. So right now you have to be 65 in order to qualify, one of the spouses. So if you're married, one of the spouses. But if that spouse passes and the other one hasn't reached 65 or 60, they would then lose the program until they reach the age of 65.
Mm-hmm. And my question is just that 50 is quite young and it's not quite like senior, like recognized under.
They still have to qualify otherwise.
Right.
I mean, if they decide they need to go back to work and suddenly they're over income, then they're over income and off the program.
You get some benefit for being married to the older spouse.
Yeah, that $1,000 tax credit you were getting from the town.
It's a big swing, 15 years. That's.
Well, it's
Well,
10.
it's
Going
10,
from
yeah.
60 to, going from 60 to 50.
60.
All right, thank you, Ms. Leclerc. Okay, the last change, which is changing the definition of qualified income.
This is Jim Walsh. The only question I have is the way you want to change it to is the way we're currently doing it. Is that what you just said?
That's how we interpret the language already, but this is now going to make us consistent with the state language.
Okay. I have no questions.
Okay. And I just have a question on this last one, and maybe I'm going off a very vague memory here, but it's actually a question for you, Mr. Walsh. I thought, and you were involved with the committee the last time we passed this ordinance. Do you recall how we came up with this definition of qualifying income? I feel like we discussed it during our meeting when we voted on it, and I'm trying to remember the rationale of taking AGI and, you know, instead of just a, I mean, I'm not sure it matters much if this is how it's been interpreted anyway, but was there a reason for doing it the way we did it?
I think we like this provision from another format we saw in another town.
Okay.
Remember that same way?
I might have not been here when that particular language was adopted.
Yeah.
So it was likely, you know, borrowed from another town,
Yeah.
or possible that the state has changed their language.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mary's got a question.
So I personally like tying it to the tax returns because that's what we use as our supporting backup. And adjusted gross income is clearly defined, and you also report your tax exempt income on your tax return. So those two numbers are very clearly defined the way we have it. When you get into taxable and non-taxable and make it a little more vague like that, then there comes all different kinds of questions like with capital gains. You're gonna look at the proceeds, or you're gonna look at the net. Are you going to look at the sale of a personal residence? To me, there's a lot more questions on how you define those terms. So that's why I like what we have.
Does AGI have non-taxable income in there?
It's
The
not
AGI
included
line.
in the number, but you report it on your tax return.
But if it's not going to be included, we're taking the AGI. So my concern is somebody buys a bunch of municipal bonds. It's a multi-millionaire and just hates paying taxes. So just buys, that income wouldn't be reported, that it's not taxable income.
I think you do include it. I think it's just like.
We just find that all taxable and non-taxable is fair.
And that's consistent with the state.
It's consistent with the state. So it just makes it, when we're qualifying them, we're doing the same method for the state as we do for the town. It's just the town has a higher limit.
And in the full language, you do count tax exempt income the way it's written now. We're not just taking the AGI. Correct.
I mean, it almost, Mary, maybe this is a question for you, or like, it almost sounds like the rewrite would have us capturing. Am I wrong about this? Does it have us potentially capturing more income? Because I mean,
Gross income, yeah, it has definitely like the top line of your tax line.
Capture?
so this is this, and I mean, Mary, am I right? Does this make so if somebody had non-taxable income, that's not in AGI, right? You take it, like AGI excludes like your
But I
whatever.
believe that gets added in the way I think it's just not in this paragraph that we have in front of us. But I believe that is in the senior tax relief, that you add back the tax exempt.
It's.
Add back the tax exempt income?
Yep.
But this is a starting point for your taxable income.
There's a list, this paragraph
Yeah.
goes on to
Yeah,
list
yeah,
over a bunch of non-taxable.
Yeah.
But that would mean then we'd have to, are we changing other language or we're just changing the language that's highlighted there, right? So.
Just making it.
Highlight.
It's deleting the red strike and adding the yellow highlight.
Then
Yeah, so, I mean, if it's defined later, like the way I think of AGI is, you know, just, I mean, obviously this is for retirees, but if you're a working person, like your 401k contribution comes out of your AGI, right? Like those are the things that come out. And so you're taking out non-taxable income like that, right? Whereas this is saying all taxable and non-taxable, which if it's consistent with the state, that's fine. I was just trying to evaluate what the change might be. And it seems like the new wording is almost more inclusive to capture all possible sources of income, which seems to be what we would want, right?
Know what they're worth.
I agree with
That's the goal. That's how the state looks at it. They want to capture
Yeah.
what you have to live off of.
Sure. So,
It's broader.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
well, so if you follow the paragraph past the highlighted portion, it refers back to adjusted gross income. So at the end, it's saying, so all taxable, non-taxable income, and then it lists off various sources of that. And at the very end, it says, and any other income not included in the adjusted gross income.
Should that read any other income not included in the qualifying income? Since qualifying income is being defined by either the AGI at currently or taxable and non-taxable income? I would think that, I
guess it's trying to say this, yeah. Okay.
I would think that reference to AGI, about 4 lines below the highlight, should read, not included in the qualifying income, since qualifying income is defined above. Good catch. I had not picked that up. That's a good catch. Because there is reference in the next line to applicant's qualifying income.
So Ross, is the state definition this entire, is it, if we were to make this change, does this entire paragraph align precisely with the state definition? I mean, down to, you know, adding back unreimbursed gross medical and dental, et cetera?
State does not add back medical.
Okay, so that's our stuff, but so it's, okay.
You have a calculation that you use, right? You know the items that you're including. Is there any reason you couldn't just list them out here? Or gross income, including this or excluding whatever deductions to that?
You want a specific list?
Well, I mean, it's
Of the non-tax. Beyond
not going to be that many of them.
I mean, if we were to go with the
So-
state definition, what does the state definition say?
This. I don't have that with me. I don't have the states. Come with me.
Federal government uses modified adjusted gross income to make calculations like this, like to determine what portion of your social security benefits become taxable. So if you're a person who has a lot of municipal bond interest on top of whatever you have in AGI, your tax on your SSI will go up. Maybe that's something you could consider as a basis.
So, the reason I ordered these 5 changes in the order in which they are listed is because I figured they would get progressively more hairy. So,
You know as well.
yeah, and I appreciate the point that was originally made that the intent is to align the definition of qualifying income with the state definition. If this particular language doesn't accomplish that, I think that can be addressed by the RTM. I think the spirit and intent of what this board, knowing that we don't write the legislation or the ordinance, what we're trying to do is confirm that we agree with the intent to align the definition of qualifying income so that then the RTM can work on the specific language.
I would like to get confirmation of that, Craig. I could be wrong, but I I know there were a number of questions on our authority on this and the RTM's authority. And what I understood, and I spoke to Mr. Baldwin about this when he was our town attorney. I have not spoken to Mr. Pierce, but what he communicated to me was that the RTM could only, you know, sort of ratify what the Board of Finance voted on. They could vote up or down on anything we could propose, but they could not make changes. So if that's the case, I'm not sure I would agree with that, but I guess the question is, you know, if we were to take the pure state definition, and the reason, what I sort of remember about this from the last time we went through it is I feel like we spent some time discussing this provision to make sure that we were capturing, you know, any situation where someone might, you know, I don't know, monkey around with something, for example. But I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about this. If we were to simply revise this and go straight to the state definition, that would be an option versus just changing a couple of words to get to the state definition. But then I'm not sure what the impact would be. But I mean, maybe that's something the committee might look at.
Sure. I think that makes sense. Rather do it once and get it right, even if it takes a little bit more time. So I guess I'd ask Mr. Murray whether you would be comfortable with this board moving on 4 of the 5 and deferring this one change until the next cycle.
Yeah, I'd like to get the other 4 forward. Yeah. So we're
okay leaving this one alone.
Yeah, so if that's the general consensus, I think I would make a motion to amend this item so that we're currently slated to vote on all 5 in one vote. So what I'd like to do is make an amendment to remove the 5th change, the 5th suggested change from the request so that this board can act or vote on the first 4 requested changes.
Okay. So just to be clear, you're making a motion to strike the language beginning with suggested change number 5.
Correct. So the suggested, the request will end after the 4th suggested change.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All right. Seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. Any more discussion on this?
I would just like to say, I don't see why we need to change the language at all. I think the taxable income is defined and the non-taxable income is defined after that. Is what it is. It might not match perfectly with the state. I think ours is a clear definition. I think it should stay as is, but I have no problem. I will vote for this revised motion.
Okay, so Jim, your comment wasn't in relation to the motion. You're just agreeing that we should strike number 5. Is that
Exactly.
right? Okay.
And the reasons why I think we should strike number 5.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the motion to amend?
If you look at your 10-4, you can see.
Okay.
AGI, not just AGI.
All right, all in favor of the motion to amend, please raise your hand.
Unanimous.
Okay, that is unanimous 8-0. Okay, so with that, we can vote on the amended item. So all in favor of approving the changes to the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Program, inclusive of the amendment and recommended by the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee in the meeting materials, please raise your hand. Okay, that looks unanimous 8-0. Okay, thank you, everyone. And I just want to thank Mr. Curley and the committee for your work. And we look forward to hearing back on this other item. And Mr. Murray, I hope the implementation of the first 4 items makes your life a little easier going forward this year.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we're going to move on to item 12, which is to hear an update from the tax assessor regarding the property tax revaluation process. And just as background on this item, you know, maybe for the public or our new members, our town charter, specifically section 8.3D, sets forth responsibilities for the Board of Finance related to property tax assessments. So I'll just quickly read that charter paragraph. It says, the Board of Finance shall install and shall modernize from time to time a system by which equitable and just values of taxable property within the town may be ascertained. The system shall provide, among other things, for the collection of data relating to each parcel of land and to each building within the town, and for the arrangement of such data in convenient and practical form for the use of the assessor. The system may provide for the preparation and upkeep of tax maps and land maps in the discretion of the Board of Finance. So for practical purposes, that provision of our charter is functionally obsolete because state statute mostly governs the process of property tax revaluations, and this board is certainly not in the business of maintaining the systems for property tax valuations or challenging the results, nor do we have the authority to do it. That being said, the way this provision has been interpreted in recent years is that this board will hear and be informed about the system and methodologies used to conduct the property tax valuations, including the process of hiring any outside parties to assist the town in that process. We don't have voting authority on these matters, but we do have the opportunity to listen, ask questions, and comment on the process. And that process has just recently gotten underway with, I understand an RFP was sent out for third-party services to do the reval. So given that Mr. Murray's here with us tonight, we thought this would be a good opportunity for him to give this board a quick update on the status of the reval process and the timeline, and to determine if our board members have questions or would like to have additional information going forward. So with that long-winded explanation, Ross, I'll turn it over to you to update us on status.
Thank you. So as you said, the RFP was issued a couple weeks ago, I believe, and it will be concluded this next Friday. So we'll have our bid opening on Friday afternoon. So we will then have the amounts for the budget. So we have a much better idea what the budgeted amount should be. Revals, as you probably know, are required to be done once every 5 years, and we are required to verify the data that we have on properties once every 10 years. In the past, historically, that's been done by physically knocking on doors. The state does now allow us to do that by a data mailer. So we are going to be using data mailers this time. We will verify up to 1,000 of those data mailers with a physical visit, and that should satisfy the state program. We will also be using some new technologies. We currently use a product called, or a subscription service called NearMap. NearMap gives us aerial imagery once every or twice a year, once in the spring with oblique images, and once in the fall, just vertical. Phenomenal tool for our office. You know, we were able to speed up the permit process and verify a lot of the smaller permits very quickly. We are also have a flight scheduled through pictometry through the MetroCog. MetroCog is sponsoring the flight, and we'll have those pictures later this spring. As part of that, we're going to have an additional service called Sketch Check. So they will take our sketch from Vision and compare it to the outline footprint of the building from the latest image. And they will point out and highlight discrepancies that we will need to check. So we will be looking for that. They'll look for building footprint differences, patios, pools, larger accessory structures. So they'll highlight those items, and we will use that to, you know, identify things that are missing and things that need to be added. And the last piece of technology, in this RFP I'm starting to work on now, is street level imagery. In the past, we've had typically hired the reval company to go out, and they send people out with cameras into the street and take a picture of all the houses. And it's very useful to have a fresh image of the house. They do have newer companies are now offering Google type service where they will drive with a vehicle, take images every 5 meters, about 16 feet. So you get multiple images of each house. They also capture LiDAR data, which allows you to measure from that image. So we can measure from that. We can also measure from our ear map imagery and from the photometry imagery. So there's a lot of desktop review that can be done. The IAAO, which is our international association, has new standards allowing you to use desktop review for your revaluations without having to go physically to the houses, so long as you have program in place to follow up on building permits and that current, so that you're looking for your known changes and using some of these other technologies. So it's coming. But we're not quite to the point where we can completely do away with the physical visits. If we don't get a data mailer returned, we will need to go out to those houses. Currently, I believe about, if you go to knock on doors, you get into about 5% of the houses overall. So it's not really very beneficial.
Is that because people are at home or that people just won't let you in?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, people, think about it. Who knocks on the door anymore?
Politicians.
Who went in this room? People don't come to us. Or texting you ahead of time. So, anytime you see somebody walking down, rare to. It's, our state statutes need to get updated. Through our organization. And so that's where we're at right now. Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I guess, are you the
Questions?
same neighborhoods and number of areas the same? To comparison? Last year, last.
Part of the evaluation, neighborhoods are this being a full reval, time into that. Typically, you don't do that so much when it's an update reval. But they did spend some time with that last reval. We'll spend some time with this reval. You're not likely to see major changes. Typically, neighborhoods don't move drastically. But they do. They do change over time.
Beach changed kind of radically.
I'm sorry?
The beach area changed a little bit, kind of radically.
But not the neighborhood. I mean, the neighborhood has changed, but not the boundaries.
Right, exactly.
I think you're referring to the boundaries of those neighborhoods.
Yes, so, for example, I live on Indison Road and we got included with the university area, which traditionally those were two separate areas. So that's, I guess, my question.
We'll be looking at that. That's
Sturgis Park area.
Yeah.
or university.
Right?
All right, I think we're good.
All right. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So,
Democratic friends, your budget books are here.
Thank you.
Your name's on them.
Thank you.
all right. Thank you. Let's move on to item 13 to hear, consider, and act on any communications. Mr. Becker, do you have anything for us?
Do not.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. If not, I will make a motion to adjourn. Have a second. Okay, Mr. Stark, all in favor? Okay, good night, everyone.
Heat off in here. It's so cold.
Thank you.
Like, I need a space.